Thank you so much for tuning into Angified as we go ahead and we come through a journey with Talking Shhh IT with Tony and Glenn.
I always think of like the air of a tire coming out when you do that. I love it. Beautiful song there, Ange. You came in with.
Definitely.
I love you. Change the world. And we've got some cool guests tonight. We got Mike and Ian, known as Silly Noiser 1 and Silly Noiser 2. And we're talking about some interesting stuff tonight because they're getting their album ready and pushing it out to DistroKid, right?
Yes.
Ian?
Yes, exactly.
And Yeah, and you're asking the right questions as far as like, what happens when you set your stuff up over there, and what they do as a service as they push to these different outlets that they push to. And one of them being YouTube. That's what we were just talking about. What do you need in order for them to set your stuff up on YouTube, or do they set up your YouTube account where you don't have control over that account? It's just their mechanism for distributing to. So I'm going to be curious and interested to see how this goes with you guys and what you run into. Love to hear that along the way as you get this set up.
We'll keep you posted.
We're
Yeah.
pretty clueless,
Well, there's a
really.
lot of people.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, and so aren't. I mean, I've heard of all the DistroKid stories between different artists who use it. There's a lot of artists here on BandLab that are going this route, and probably just as, blind going in as what you guys are dealing with. There's not a lot of information out there on
Mm,
how it all works.
that's true.
You just hear people say, "Oh yeah, I use DistroKid." You don't hear them explain like what they did to do it.
I agree. They look for the
And
results.
as you
Yeah.
were saying, you were spending all day on this, getting it set up, right? You
Yes.
had to do a lot of preparation to get this set up.
It would go a lot quicker the next time. That's for sure. You've got to. It was really interesting that they broke each song down. 8 tracks for the album. They get put up there, and they ask you some fundamental questions right off. Are there lyrics? Is it an instrumental? Now, some of ours are in each camp. Sometimes we have a real vocalist like Abel. Sometimes we're using clips and things.
Great singer.
Oh yeah, yeah, we love her. And then sometimes it's
Yeah,
just a flat out
same
instrumental.
here.
So there was a lot of breakdown, and until you get up to their site and do it the
Now,
first
now,
time,
why do
yeah,
why do you think they ask that? Why do you think they ask, like, is there lyrics? Or you think that maybe they might be checking lyrics to see if people are
mhm.
using other people's lyrics? Because that's what I would guess.
That was my first thought. But then when I went back up to it, I actually did this yesterday. So, and then I looked at it again and I thought, no, wait, they might be actually putting it in another column so that they're waiting for me to upload the lyrics because these are original songs. That's
Oh,
the first
to
fork in the
actually
road.
type them in? Yeah.
Yeah, perhaps. And then they showed for the two that were pure lyric vocal type songs, they offered me suddenly, it's all about add-on services like everything else is. You have this carrot that
Mm-hmm.
gets you in the door as low as, I don't know, $20 a year. But then you start clicking off all those options and extras that you want, and it never stops. So the two lyric songs have two different little icons that say we can make a video, an automation video to go along with these
Oh, for a
songs.
lyric track.
For the lyric ones,
Mm-hmm.
strangely, they
Very
were not.
popular. That
Yeah.
that makes
But
sense. Very popular on YouTube. Like people like to go to the lyric version sometimes just to. It's like
yeah.
karaoke, and you can follow it, and
And that's the best I could, but it leaves you guessing. It's not like it's like, oh, they explain every step along the way. I just uploaded the song and it's making me fill out and make all these decisions. And you keep thinking in the back of your mind, am I going to hit the wrong box here? And what is my,
I hope
my
this
ultimate.
decision doesn't bite me in the ass.
Exactly. And, totally waste my time
Yeah.
and money here because Mike and I have talked about this a lot in our private conversations is the biggest problem with you can do things on BandLab to your heart's content. And not until you can pass through what I call, the gatekeepers like Google. And we talked about the strikes and then the monetization that they could steal away from you. say I flat out play a Led Zeppelin song, a cover of it, they'll just monetize it. They'll just take all my money for it, for example. But I'm afraid that these 8 songs, what if there's somebody ahead of me that has some essence of this song? I mean, what is there, like 30, there's 30 million songs. I mean, it's a torrential rate of uploading for all over the world into YouTube and these all other algorithm driven sites. If someone gets in there ahead of you with something, I'm worried that they can grab your monetization. It's first come, first serve, or maybe even provide strikes like, hey, you used that clip, an Apple loop clip or whatever, that everyone in the world's used, for example, right?
And that's where it can get squirrely, because with these algorithms, you don't know if they're like detecting for, say, loops,
Right.
or pieces. Um, and coming from BandLab, depending on, like, if they're collaborations or there's possibility of somebody else
Yeah.
doing something with the same. You guys are lucky because your stuff's really original, and
Well, thank you.
it really is coming from you. You're likely distinct enough that the AI isn't going to confuse your stuff with possibly somebody else's. But
But
some of these
it's
artists who are just grabbing loops and using, sometimes backing tracks that they grab from wherever,
right.
they can run into that problem, almost guaranteed they're going to run into it eventually.
Well, and clearly there's going to be some other styles where, rappers, guys have their art and, it's about their lyric and what their message. But sometimes they're going to have to grab, entire tracks, perhaps.
Yeah.
Maybe someone, they're paying for them, they're original. Maybe you're just grabbing them off
Yeah.
sites or assembling things. Everything is basically, well, not everything, but many things are cut and paste now, right?
Yeah.
Copy
Yeah, you have
paste.
a lot of apps nowadays where, like, they are they build songs off of
Hang
their
on,
own little loop
guys.
blocks.
The
Yeah, I
stream
saw I,
stopped.
I saw that. I figure you'll get that back up.
Yeah, just wanted to give you a heads up.
Okay. And so,
Yeah.
but I'm not worried in that sense. I think our songs, the overall product, the final thing is pretty original. Um, it just comes out that way because of who Mike and I are. The final product is it's good. It's going to have a certain sound that I think there's a
Yeah.
commonality between the songs. There's a style to it. But on the other hand, I'll go back to the uploading process. They really wanted to peg me down to what style is it. So I said, electronic. And,
Hmm.
I'm not sure that it is. And then beyond that, they were like, they gave me a
And
list. Yeah,
they're
yeah,
asking because when they push it, they want to push it in genres over on the other platforms. So they have a
yeah.
legitimate reason to be like, asking for these things. But sometimes that's a hard, especially for you guys. Like, you got a couple of styles going at one time.
Well,
You're
many.
multi-genred in your sound. So
Well, when
do
I
they
got to
do
the
they give you
subs,
the option to pick subs,
yes,
or do
but
they
that
like
then
make
it
you
even got
shoehorn
worse
yourself
though.
into a genre?
It got worse, Tony, because first I could say electronic, and I figured that you could drive a bus through that for, what, 20, 30 years
Yeah.
or more of electronic. But then they said, was it synth wave? Was it this wave? House, big room, future
Oh,
bass?
geez.
There were like 20 sub designations.
Electronics gotten complicated these days. In the old days, you could have just said electronic and would have been like,
Right.
oh, there's keyboards. Now
Well,
it's like,
you
what kind of electronic? Well, geez.
Well, you
I
probably
didn't
use
know what to
Ian,
something
you,
put.
temperamental,
you,
Tony.
Ian, you should always just use disco. You know that, right?
I
Just
did.
disco.
Mike, you know that you and I know disco is close to our heart. Um, and so I did put that in there,
And I think
funk.
it's making a comeback.
No, certainly hope so.
Well, we like to
Um,
keep a groove going regardless in the electronica. It has kind of a
yeah,
groove to it, underneath kind of
and a
deal.
huge 4 on the floor kick drum, which we play around with. But you know what? The subgenre, when I could type in a couple things, I put jazz underneath it, honestly, because I think that's
Well,
what.
that's fitting. That's
Yeah,
fitting for you. Yeah, for you guys. That if you were gonna have to pick one, uh, fusion jazz would
Yeah.
cover it.
One day we hope that all elevators in New York will play our music.
Nice.
That's what we're shooting for, really.
I want the Hajj, you know, the tallest building in the world, because then you're gonna have to listen to the whole 5-minute song, the opus.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
We
Those
need,
elevators are pretty fast, though.
oh, damn it. Well, you know,
Speed up the song. Speed up the
there's
song.
always the supermarket, right? You know, as you're shopping to listen to opus, you know,
Okay.
10, you know, you don't know, you realize all the
Yeah, and your
voices in the
stuff would.
back there that they're saying, buy the ice cream, buy the ice cream.
You know,
There's-
that is actually a market that hasn't been tapped into yet, which is when you're on hold. Like, you know, you think
Oh,
about
yeah.
them anyway. You know,
Oh, it's maddening what you get on
you could
hold now.
That's
but you could
actually a
have
good point.
you could have it monetized. I mean, I'm not saying I could do it, but I could see it as a growth market, because if you could choose what you want to hear as opposed to just getting whatever, right?
That's a
Or
great idea.
if some young band pushed it
I
on
would
some
love that. Press 1 for your background
Exactly.
music. If I would love that. If
Right.
you can convince companies that the benefits of, especially the ones that keep people on hold for long periods of time, you know, your tech
Yes.
support and places like that, a song backing service that would allow the callers to pick the classical, pick the jazz while
Yes.
you're waiting. Um, that's how you get people to be not so pissed off that they're waiting 30 minutes for
True.
a tech support agent.
Brilliant. Tony, let's do it. I think that we can end the show right now. Let's get
Yeah,
busy.
well,
All right.
I
Nick.
want
that's a good business to build,
Wow.
because all those the companies that sell the music that they use for the waiting and things like that, they tend to get that from, you know, big licensing libraries. So,
Yeah.
you know, they pay flat fees to get like a library of music so that they can use for that. So you just extend on that library access to giving them choices and giving them a mechanism so that the person on hold can, you know, press here to change while you're waiting.
and then every
And
three
I
songs
don't want to hear this crappy music. I want to hear this music.
after 3 songs they get 30 seconds of something like an ad, which is a new song, right? I mean, pushing artists anyway. Anyway,
well, or like at the
here's a
gas
good idea.
I
station
think
where
it'd be
they're
really cool
yeah.
if they say, like, you know, that like the radio does, like, that was such and such. If I'm sitting there listening to that music while I'm on hold and I hear something that's really cool, new, fresh, that I've never heard before, then I am asking myself, like, whoa, I want to hear that again. Please tell me who it was.
Yeah.
And isn't Sirius
You
Sirius really ready for that? I mean, you know,
you mean
I
Sirius
uh,
Radio?
Sirius Radio, yeah. In a way, as a company that could come in and do something like that.
yeah, you could choose your genre from their
They would be a
selections.
great one to do it.
Yeah,
They
yeah.
would be a great one to do it, because in their mechanism, they do keep track. They have meta tags in their, like, if you're looking on the radio, you can see it shows you. So
Exactly.
that they would be
Yeah,
the
yeah.
right kind of company to do something like this, because they've already got the mechanism in place.
Yeah.
They just have to
Yeah.
use it in a different way like this.
Mhm. Yeah, I agree.
They
There's
might they might
opportunity
improve
there.
they might improve all this time we sit waiting for somebody to pick up the phone.
Oh, hell yeah. Well, they should keep people entertained and distracted. I mean, that's what life is practically all about now anyway with TV, right? But you're ranting, you're
Yeah.
waiting to get that yell at that person who doubled your electricity bill or whatever it may be. And if you could calm them
Or
down,
why is my modem not working?
that's right.
So you add some AI and you go like, Mr. Smith, you seem very agitated. How
Yeah,
about some
right.
meditation music for you, sir?
Then you're
Oh God,
screaming twice as loud.
if it starts detecting my mood, yeah, if it's
Oh.
detecting my mood and giving me music based on, like,
Yeah.
although that would be slick, you know, that's the next level of AI there.
Yeah. Or maybe they let you rant and they play some, some really heavy metal, and you scream along with that for 5 minutes. You're worn out, and then they take your call. I don't know. It could be different
That's
ways
not a
to
bad
go.
idea either. Yeah, if you gave me a chance to like rant to some heavy metal, like as I complain about the $100 I'm spending every month and this thing's not working, I might actually cool down
That's right.
it with the
Get it out
right
of your
kind of
system.
music. Hmm.
Well, we have the Mike. That
I
was
would
your
have
idea. I'm
loved
going to
those
give you
things.
credit there.
Yeah,
Well,
Mike, you're thinking out the box here. I like it.
3% for all of us, everyone.
You deserve 5% of the royalty on that for your idea. Nice job.
Glenn's in on this too.
Oh yeah,
Beef.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Glenn's going to be the technician who.
He's actually already setting it up on the side. That's why he's so quiet here.
Press
Just signed a
5
Yeah,
for
contract.
heavy
he
metal.
could.
Press 3 for
When
peaceful
when
jazz.
That's right.
when the tech support answers the phone, he goes, "God, I love Metallica. Have you heard their fourth album?"
No.
It gets on the guy's side.
There you go.
What beautiful manipulation! I love it.
Well, the thing is,
Yeah.
Tony has said AI to feel out the people. The way things are going with, big tech surveillance and pulling all your data into buckets, they're going to know everything about you anyway as soon as they see your phone
Exactly.
number.
If they're pulling it from there, they don't even need to hear your voice. They probably already know how you are.
Right? Let's see, you already have 4 Metallica albums. Yeah.
Yeah.
So they play your favorite music. That's right out of your BandLab library or whatever it is, right?
Spotify, yeah, whatever.
And,
Yeah.
and
Well,
that lends itself to like all those customization features.
Yes.
You'll
That's what it's
notice with
about. Yeah.
Windows, because I guess did any of you notice today, like when my Windows machines came up, they're pushing Windows 11. Did you know Windows 11 was out yet?
No.
I didn't, and I used to keep up with this stuff, and all of a sudden, Windows 11 is out. They're the kinds of things that they're pushing with these new operating systems is all about the customization. Now, me, I turn all that stuff off.
Mm.
First thing I do when my Windows just got installed is turn off. Don't geolocate. I don't
Right.
want customization. If this is a compelling reason for customization, if you do want your phone to know what kind of music you want while you're on hold, there's
Right.
a compelling reason there.
But there's two, it's a
But I would
double-edged
rather
sword.
volunteer that information.
Yes.
I would rather volunteer that information, hear a voice like Glenn say, press 1 for smooth jazz. I'd rather choose it myself than
Yes.
give that information away on a regular basis every time I'm going to Spotify or something like that.
It wouldn't be hard to set up a menu system for that either.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. Yeah, but
And we can make you the voice. You could be the voice of the future on hold.
I'm with
Welcome to
that
Movie
totally.
Phone.
You got the right voice for it.
Totally. He's calming and kind of authoritative. Like, look, you're going to pay your bill anyway. Just relax.
Yep.
Here's
We
a
already-
We'll
coupon.
get
Here's a
through this
$20
together.
coupon at Grubhub. Exactly.
Grubhub.
Yeah. Yeah. And so while they're waiting online, you sell, for their phone call, you sell them some extra stuff, right? Time is
Absolutely.
money.
No time shall be
You
wasted.
might have an opportunity to. You might have an opportunity to.
Press 1. This call is so long, you're going to need a burrito. So choose from the following menu. We'll have it at your house by the time the call's finished.
Delivered by drone. Exactly.
It would also be good if it was like realistic about it. Like instead of saying, we'll be right with you and then giving you the same story for the next 15 minutes, it should be like, look, this is going to be a while.
Yeah.
So, which types of music do you want to listen to for the next 20 minutes? And then we'll get to
Yeah.
you.
Now, for an extra fee, we could
Yeah.
upgrade you to Metallica's new album.
Now, just to blow a hole in this whole thing,
Oh,
they also say if it's long, they go, "Can we call you back at
Oh,
the number?"
hate
they'll
that,
provide
yeah.
it. Look at that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That happens with the cable company a lot.
Yeah.
When I was doing all the tech support and having to call for, cable modem problems, especially when like the service is down for a lot of people, it could be hours. I have literally waited 2.5, 3 hours to get to a support technician.
Oh, yeah.
And those callbacks, I wish they had that back then. because I didn't really want to stay for 3 hours. But you know, once you hit that point where you've been there so long, you're like, I'm not leaving now. I've been here for an
Exactly.
hour. At this point, you guys better pick up the damn phone.
Oh yeah, and you just get in the car and the phone's still running, right? You just go on with your day, waiting. You're in Walmart and finally they pick up. It's we have, as you know, from the old days, Tony, in Connecticut, we have the hurricanes, and so EverSource is my power. I live in the middle of nowhere, so when it goes off, it's off for a week, and you cannot get through to EverSource. It is the most painful, ridiculous situation. Uh, anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. So anyway, hey, BandLab has come up with some new pushes and a new look and feel recently, and
Okay.
they have
Yeah. What do you guys think of that?
I like it.
sampler now. It's a little 16
Ah,
button loop sampler thing they got going.
Yeah,
Yeah,
very cool.
Glenn was showing us that last week. That's what we were
Yeah,
talking about last week. We were going through this. Matter of fact, the upgrades all came last Thursday, so it was perfect because like we were
mm,
like, "Whoa, there's
yeah,
a new
yeah.
option in adding tracks." And Glenn had already gone in it and done some samples with his bass and tried it out. Have you gotten a chance to play with the sampler yet?
Yeah, I grabbed some loops that were there and put together a little tropical reggae thing, and then Abel forked it, and I just wanted to play with it. I wanted to try it out and see how it worked,
Nice.
comparing it to other component driven Apple loops and the other types of things that are out there.
Yeah.
And some of the limits I found were,
And you
well,
deal with samplers. Uh, you
oh yeah,
deal with samplers in your setup, so like compared to like
mm.
your local sampler, it's pretty powerful for like a web-based sampler. I was impressed at how much they managed to cram into a browser-based sampler.
Yes.
it's true. And but for me, what I discovered anyway was that if you use their loops anyway, when you make the recording and export it, you get just one stereo track as opposed to 16 separate tracks to muck about with.
Yeah.
Now, I may not know how to use it properly yet. That's the other thing. But that was a bit of a limitation as far as I could tell.
To me, I was looking
Sorry
at
to
the
be so.
Yeah, and
16 separate pads as like components to make one track, as opposed to each one having its own track on there for triggers, depending
Yeah,
on
right.
how big the samples want to be. But you could use it for individual samples as well. But the other thing is you can make as many of those samplers as you want. So like if you put in, like, let's say you made a sampler full of 16 things, you can just do a duplicate track, and then you have a whole second sampler filled with all those things, and you can just rearrange them or get rid of ones or whatever. But you can have as many of those, like one on each track if you want, to have each one doing different things.
So
Hmm.
but when I made the recording, it all went to one track, and I didn't see an option for splitting all of the tracks to 16.
Right. It wouldn't split that way automatically, but what I'm saying is you could
Right.
make 16 copies of that same track. Like you just go
Here,
duplicate
here,
track.
Oh
here.
yeah,
No,
yeah. I see what you mean. Yeah.
I thought of that process too, and it was like, I can get, that's the long, that's the scenic route for sure.
Right.
yeah.
You
Yeah.
know,
It's sort of like taking drums, and then you put them into a MIDI thing, and you grab all the hi-hats, or you delete the other guys and leave the hi-hat, right? And so you do it 5 times, and one MIDI track ends up with a kick drum, one ends up with a snare drum, right? The deletion process to separate it out.
Actually, there's an easier way to do that within Cakewalk, at least. And that was one of the 5 tips that I have lined up for later on, as a
Yeah.
video.
Ah,
But
oh cool.
he has a section basically where you can go in and tell it to split the track to, basically based on what note you hit. So like he was talking about drums also. So let's say it's 6 different pieces in the drum kit. So it
It's
would
a lot
split.
like MIDI filtering.
Yeah, it would split all of the
The
kick drum
way
notes
he's
to one
talking about.
spot.
Yeah.
Got it. So on the PC operating system where Cakewalk works locally, that's a great option. Yeah, got
Yep.
it.
Yeah. Well, you have all those MIDI filtering. That's one of my complaints about, the online editor. The reason why I can't do my MIDI over there, it's got no MIDI editor. It's got rudimentary MIDI choices. You can't even like really specify your channels on things. You just gotta kind of set each track to something. But like the basic MIDI tools that are necessary in order to do the kind of stuff I do, MIDI filtering and MIDI editing, if I can't bring up all those events and say, show me like, every hit on this one note, then it's not very useful for the kind of work I do. Fortunately, you can do that with your, cakewalks and your local DAWs, but their online editor has not really hit prime time for MIDI usefulness.
Aren't we a
It's a good
demanding
starting
bunch?
point.
We're demanding
Yeah, it's a good
people.
starting point for somebody
Yeah.
who's new to MIDI. My only complaint is if you are new to MIDI, I wouldn't recommend actually starting there because you'll learn MIDI the wrong way. You'll learn without emphasis on channels and certain things that you should be aware of when it comes to MIDI. They kind of dumb it down like how Apple does. If you ever use GarageBand and try to do MIDI inside of GarageBand, again, they don't focus on channels. They don't let you see MIDI events. You can't really do the things that you're supposed to do with MIDI, and it's not a good way to learn that way. You start thinking like everything happens automatically in the background. No, it doesn't.
Wait a minute, Tony. I wrote
Does
all the
Logic
songs
handle
and
that
MIDI
better?
parts in GarageBand.
That's true. Wait. But does Logic
Now, how do
handle
you
that?
edit? How do you edit your events in
I was
GarageBand?
gonna say,
Well, yeah.
Does Logic have better MIDI and
Well,
event?
Logic does. Logic does.
Ah.
GarageBand doesn't. GarageBand is a baby MIDI sequencer.
Yeah, because Ian,
Logic is a full blown.
Yeah.
you moved to Logic and then you went back and forth between Logic and GarageBand a
It
couple of times.
depends on what I need to do. If I need to stretch things, but there's some fine
And
tuning because
yeah, GarageBand's great for.
well, GarageBand for me is great as an artist. I want to get ideas down very quickly. And that's what it allows me to do. It's like a sketching on a pad. I can go at it. The ideas come, they come fast, and we've got to get them down. But then when I get into the more technical stages, then I bring Logic up to do certain things. But it's a highly technical program for me, and it's almost more for engineers than it is musicians, in my view.
Yeah.
And every time I pull something up a window down, it's got 16 options just to do one damn thing that I want to do. And
that doesn't lend itself to creativity. You're
it's a
right.
wet blanket.
Yeah.
Is what it is. So, but sometimes I have to go over there, like to export MIDI, right? So I have taken, I will do the thing in BandLab, and then I open that project with Logic. Then I can get at the MIDI and I can export it and put it up, say, on BandLab, and somebody else can have a whack at it. I've done that with some of the classical people where they want some of the phrasing, the violin parts and things that I've written, and I put the MIDI up there, and they can either grab it or manipulate it there. That's how I use it.
And that's really awesome that you're giving a MIDI in those cases. If I want a phrase of a violin from you, getting it in MIDI is the best gift you can give me.
And that's what a guy asked me for. I don't know if you know Peter, his name's something like Recton, but he's over in UK, and he's a fabulous classical gifted arranger. And so he was doing one of my songs, Amore or something. Entire orchestral thing with it. And the first thing he asked was, he didn't want to reinvent the wheel. He said, give me all your MIDI parts. And then I was like stumbling. I was like, yeah, but I played them all on my Nord. They're all analog. And so I had to
go. You didn't actually sequence them.
In not the first round, I had to go back.
They were actual analog, yeah.
Yeah, and he was like, I don't know. He didn't tell me straight up, but I had a feeling at that point he was like, it's like, you're not in the modern times, are you? Basically, he was saying. So I got his drift. I went back over to my native instrument system, and I remodeled all the main themes for him, and I put them up there. So, but
that was very nice of you, because that is a lot of extra work to reproduce it again in MIDI. Were they individual instrument tracks?
In many cases, yes.
One thing I would have considered there is if the instrument tracks were nice and separate, I would have ran them through Melodyne, because Melodyne is great if it's just dealing with a single instrument and notating it. It'll notate pretty damn close, if not spot on, for a decent slow track. If it's really fast stuff, I mean, even Melodyne can get a little lost on, a speed solo. But if it's straightforward melodies and things like that, it'll transcribe it over to MIDI for you.
Well, Mike, it's almost a joke because he thinks I'm a Melodyne advertisement now. I love the program
Not
so
until
much.
you fork up the $1,000 for the real software.
So
Yeah.
now I'm going to ask Tony the real questions. Mike, you can just leave the session for a while or you'll freak out.
Awesome.
Melodyne, Melodyne.
Leave
Tony.
my voice alone. Don't touch my. No.
So I have the $99 version, right, Tony? And I do the best I
Well,
can
even
with
that
it.
one's good. Even
Yeah.
that one's good.
And
Yeah.
I use it for all kinds of things. I create harmonies with it, counter lines. But you're touching on something that I don't know. I've never used it for. Like, say I was going to send Peter
Well,
those.
a lot of people use it more for like pitch corrections and things in
Yeah, that's what I
vocals,
do.
or a lot of people. It's actually become more popular for that than for what it really was made for, which was to transcribe. But it's
Transcribe.
powerful when.
You use it, so that's what you're saying.
Yeah,
Like to give it to Peter, I could have run the parts through Melodyne just as they were recorded and
Oh,
let it sort of
absolutely.
transcribe it out.
I've
And
taken
then,
I've taken tracks that I've collabed with people where they didn't know what they were playing. I asked them, "What key are you in?" He's like, "I don't know."
Yeah.
And I'm sitting there trying to figure out the song, and it can take me hours just to figure out like what's going on and what
Oh, yeah.
they're playing. And I took the guitar parts, just ran them through Melodyne, and literally it gave me all the notes, told me what key it was in, when the person couldn't tell me what key it was in.
Wow, that's a great use of it. I had never thought of that. Sometimes I'll use
Yeah.
Logic for that because it'll analyze tracks for you. But
Well, this
Yeah.
they might be Logic. I don't know if Logic is using the Melodyne technology, but it's the same technology. So Logic might have chose a different route to do the same thing. Melodyne's popular on the PC side, specifically with Cakewalk. That is the transcriber that comes out of the box with Cakewalk. They give you they give you the free version. It is a baby version. It doesn't do as much. It doesn't analyze as good as the paid versions do, but it will analyze a basic track
that's a great
at
use
no
for it.
cost. I mean, it comes with Cakewalk.
Well, let me ask Tony, you've got it. Do you have the upgraded versions? Is it worth it?
I got the big dog. Yeah, it's the only one that would work for the kinds of stuff that I'm trying to, um, you analyze and things. Plus, when you're dealing multi instruments or big chords and things like that, it's
Yeah.
the new one with the advanced polyphony detection. That's the only way you're gonna get that kind of conversion.
So say if a guitar player, you're working with a guy up on BandLab and he's just hopelessly out of tune. And that could be me, by the way. I'm quite a bad guitar player at times. And intonation is a problem for me. I have a problem with like picky being with pitch because I probably play fretless bass. So I hear out of tuneness like and it drives me crazy. And that's why that's our joke with Mike. I'm a Melodyne freak because it's not a perfect world. You've got to, you've got to let it go. And you've got to save the initial expression of the artist, right? There's a lot of things that.
And it makes it easy to nudge.
Yes.
It makes it easy to nudge just a little bit here and fix the little things that you need to without having to go redo it again and again.
Well, the more I work with it, the more I'm impressed with it. And it's not like there's auto tune, which is fabulous, I think, for singers. But this is on a whole different level. And I want to get more proficient with it. So back to my guitar thing, say it's me, I'm the dreadful guitar player. And every time I get up to that bar chord, it goes out of tune. But on my program, I can only deal with one note at a time. But with yours, I understand if you upgrade, you can grab the entire chord. So that intonation on that
Yes,
G string.
it can grab a lot in the advanced mode, it can grab very complex chords. It's not
Really?
perfect. The more complex it gets, the
Hmm.
more likely that it's going to misinterpret some things. But I have taken big arrangements with lots of stuff going on and watched it like break it all down.
Well, and I saw something that I'm sure you're using, that the advanced one doesn't just take the key that you're in. Say you say it's C sharp minor, and then, and of course you move in and out of the keys with most sophisticated music, but let's say it's C sharp minor. But the advanced one, you can actually get it to listen to the bass player, to the keyboard player, right? So it takes a collection of those inputs to completely surround the key. Isn't that right? It doesn't just say it's C sharp minor and pull off of a chord chart in the back. It's actually taking the
It
other instruments and dialing them
it
in.
can it does seem to analyze different sounds in a recording. Like it, as long as they're distinguishable. It gets tricky if you have two different guitars going
Mm,
and they're similar in sound, because that's one that I was trying to do an Iceman track one time, and he had he had multiple guitar tracks in one mix down,
yeah.
and I couldn't get it to analyze everything that I was trying to figure out, because it couldn't separate the two different guitars to show me what the chords that he was playing versus the, you
Mm,
know, high notes. It just got lost
arpeggiated
at that point.
parts.
But if it's
Yeah.
dealing with, like, say a bass and a guitar, you know, or a completely different, a flute and a guitar, it does separate pretty good, and
Wow.
it'll isolate them and analyze them, at least with the advanced ones.
I
So
hear
the
there's a Melodyne has a campaign out now to destroy all 12-string guitars. Hey now. Okay.
hey,
All right. Hey, hey,
sit
hey,
down.
hey. Getting too serious.
But the thing, you know what I used it for recently, Tony, was to create harmonies. And maybe you could help me with this because I'm stumbling through Melodyne, is that when you say you're looking at a single line guitar track, it's like a lead solo, and you're looking at that waveform or that track on GarageBand in my case, Melodyne is running invisibly behind it, right? So what's playing back are the edits that you've done to the Melodyne.
Well,
Um,
it's not
yeah,
likely running behind it. Do you usually you run Melodyne on the track after, and because it does take a lot of work. There are ways to real time MIDI analyze. I don't know if Melodyne might be the best one for that though, because there's a lot of, at least with the
mm,
advanced processing, it takes a moment. Like
yeah,
even on a fast computer, I might wait a minute or two before it fully sucks up the wave file and figures out
yes.
what's going on.
And that's cool, but I'll say it the other way. Instead of behind, it's layered on, right? So the way I use it,
Mm.
I think, is the most fundamental. You've got that guy's lead solo, that's me, playing just his parts. I put it in the rack, where you bring it in as a plug-in, the Melodyne, and you move it up to the top slot so it doesn't hear all the other echo and crap. You're trying to get the purest signal into Melodyne first, right? So then you set your cursor at the
Yeah.
beginning of your phrase and you, what do you call it? Transfer it. You stop it when it's finished. It analyzes it. And then the notation is there in front of you, the transcription. And then you can go in and edit it, right?
Mhm.
Intonations off, whatever it is, nudge it. But for me, the problem is, okay, I'm done with that. And now I step back later, maybe 2 days later, and I want to cut and paste that guitar part into other sections, right? But I've got to, I can't just look at the track where it's 8 measures of this little guitar part and say, oh, I'm going to grab that, move it here and there. Um, well, I can do it after the fact, but say I copy it to the end of the song, and then I want to edit that part again. You've got to keep the Melodyne is layered over it. You've got to be aware of that and also the automation and everything else. It to me it adds another
Yeah,
layer.
if it's
Yeah.
anything like how it is over on Cakewalk, it treats it like a hybrid track. You've
Yeah.
got your
Okay.
actual wave data, and then the Melodyne track that's connected to it is all the Melodyne analysis of it. I mean, technically, what you could do is just export that out as MIDI, and then copy the parts of the MIDI that you want over to the other track and pick an instrument for it to play.
Oh,
Is
now
one
let's back
approach.
up to that. Now you're really pushing my envelope. So I played this on a guitar, this 8 measures. I put it in Melodyne. You're saying convert that to MIDI?
Sure. If it's running through Melodyne, Melodyne's getting the notes. You export that Melodyne track to a MIDI track. Now, boom, you've got a MIDI version of the guitar you just played. Point it towards, a MIDI channel. Say, use an acoustic guitar, nylon,
What?
steel, whatever, and
Biggest thing
the
is
same
having the
thing you were
isolated track.
playing is now being
Wow.
played. Yeah, having the Melodyne in an analyzed track. Once Melodyne knows what you're playing on that guitar, it can export out a MIDI
How the
track
hell
for
does it
you,
do
and then
that,
you can
Tony?
use that MIDI track to
Yeah.
because it's transposing, it's transcribing.
It's
Can
using
it
the
do it
inbound
on?
sound and making it into the digital.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Glenn.
Yeah.
That was it. Just it was taking the inbound sound and just transcribing it essentially into the digital. It knows what that sound is, what that pitch means, and it just writes down that pitch at that intensity for that duration
Yeah.
and goes to the next event.
And
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 and it even brings in some of the like MIDI events. Like it can pick up expression and
mm,
other nuances in MIDI. It does a really cool job of interpreting all of that and turning it into useful MIDI for you.
well, let me really, sorry to get way out of the weeds, but this is so new and fascinating to me. I'm going to be like using it
Oh,
this
Jay,
weekend.
love talking about this stuff. I could
Uh,
talk all night
oh
about
my
it.
God, this is like a freaking breakthrough in a sense that means that you could take a singer's vocal and then you could modify that into MIDI.
Now
Are
you're
you
thinking.
listening, Mike?
Bingo.
Mike, Mike sings also quite
And
well.
you're seeing people do that. You're seeing people do that a lot more. There's a couple plugins out there that's their forte is turn your voice into an instrument. If you get the musical YouTube ads like I do, every
Yeah,
once in a while I'll get this advertisement where this guy is like
yeah,
he's singing in a mic and
yes,
he's playing a synth bass guitar as he's
mm,
singing, and
yeah,
he's making that bass guitar with his voice.
yes.
That's
I've seen
one
that ad.
example of
Same
analog
technology.
to analog to MIDI conversion.
Now let me get in the
Same
weeds
concept.
with Melodyne. When I do that transfer and it does is it converting to MIDI at that point, or is it some hybrid that later can be transformed to MIDI?
In the case of Melodyne, it analyzes it and then turns it. Then you have the option to export it as MIDI.
Okay.
At first, Melodyne will just analyze and get all its information. It's a Melodyne track tied to a audio track.
Mm,
But if you tell Melodyne to export its track to MIDI, then you've converted it. Then it takes all that note information that it figured out that's showing
wow.
you in notation and applies it to an exported MIDI track.
That's stunning, Tony. I'm not sure that I have that
Very
with my
useful.
$99 option version. And
You will have at
GarageBand.
least
Mm,
you'll have some of that ability. Your cheaper version isn't likely to be less functional as far as MIDI exporting and things like that.
yeah,
It's more likely the AI that it uses. The
yeah,
more expensive version has a more advanced AI, which for people who are doing real transcriptions
mm,
want the more advanced AI to so that they can convert all their different instruments into MIDI. The cheaper version is really designed and targeted for your sound engineers who want to use it more for vocals and for
yeah,
quick pitch corrections, where it's
yes.
become really popular. So they made the cheaper version to account for that market. So that way those guys don't have to spend $500 just to get, to fix voice tracks.
We have a
Yes.
comment from
But
somebody
even for
in
100, it's worth what you get.
we have a comment from someone in the YouTube chat named the Band Lab, and it says all you have to do in Cakewalk is drag an audio clip into a MIDI track, and it converts it automatically.
Well,
Yeah,
say it one
and
more
that's
time.
how it does it through
Yeah.
Melodyne.
Say that again,
Yeah.
please, Glenn.
In Cakewalk, you can just drag an audio clip into a MIDI track, and it'll convert it automatically. So you're
Really?
dragging like a WAV file, and you drop it into a track that's set up for MIDI, and it should convert it automatically.
Wow.
Cakewalk ties into Melodyne in a lot of cool ways. That's why they include it. When you're downloading, you'll notice under the additional options, you've got a couple of synths and instruments, and Melodyne is one of your add-on options in Cakewalk. If you have that integrated into Cakewalk, there's a lot of drag and drop that comes with it, so that like that you can drop an audio file into a MIDI track. You can take an audio file and drop it into the tempo track at the top, and it'll use Melodyne to get you your beats per minute. It creates a tempo click track for you. A lot of useful stuff that it does automatically, drag and drop in those cases.
That's fascinating. Yeah.
It's one of the hidden gems in Cakewalk that I had to find on my own. Like, you don't see a lot of info out there on how to utilize Melodyne with Cakewalk, but once you realize it's there and you do find the information, it's like, whoa, can't believe this is coming for free out of the box.
And I don't have a PC. I'm using these Apple products. I think Logic can do some things like that.
Well, you can run
Yeah.
you can run a virtual machine. You can have a PC on your Mac. I mean, actually, Macs run Windows fantastic, and that's a compelling reason to have at least one virtual machine, so that you can slap some of those PC programs that you want to use. Cakewalk will run in a virtual machine. I'm running it back there on one.
Wow. Yeah, I've always been afraid to get into, split the machine because I'm not a techie, obviously.
Eh,
Uh,
the cool thing with virtualization these days is, as long as you don't overload, if you have a decent machine with 8 gigs or more of RAM, whenever you make a virtual machine, the only thing a virtual machine does is use some of your resources. So you decide, okay, virtual machine, I'm going to let you use 2 of my CPUs. Chances are you got 4 to 8 of them. Virtual machine can use 2 CPUs and use 4 gigs of RAM. And once you've allocated that to the virtual machine, that's all the virtual machine will use of resource. So as long as you don't overload, your virtual machine, your physical machine barely knows the difference. Most people's machines are way more powerful than you're using them for. You have a lot of resource there that's not getting used.
I did
And a
not know
virtual
that.
machine lets you kind of share that resource. Why wouldn't you want to have a Windows operating system with a Mac operating system? It's not like either operating system has all the programs.
Oh, that's for sure.
I run Mac on that machine. That machine back there I have the latest Mac operating system on it. I had a project where I had to convert GarageBand files to Logic so that I could get them exported to get them over to BandLab. So I don't have a Mac machine. My only solution was to put Mac into a virtual machine, and that way I could load up GarageBand, get the source files, do all that stuff, export them out, and
Wow.
that's a Mac running inside of a Windows box.
I'm going to come up to your house near Canada there for about a week. You can set me up.
It's a long drive.
I might not move
Well,
out, though.
fortunately, I
That's
can
the
help you.
problem,
I can
Tony.
help you with this stuff. Yeah, I could help you with this stuff remotely, because I've set up many virtual machines remotely. The good thing is a virtual machine is easy to set remotely, because when we need to reboot it and things like that, you don't have to reboot your main operating system. So it's very easy for me to work on virtual machines remotely.
Ian, be careful. He's coming after your tip jar, man. He's coming after your tip jar.
He can, yeah. I'll give you half of everything we're making.
With all this
Okay.
talk of
Which will be about as much as I have in mind.
Yeah.
After this search for perfection, I'm going to insist, Ian, moving forward, that everything, at least I do, remain out of tune.
Oh, I thought you had perfect pitch. What are we talking here? Usually I have to use Melodyne to de-pitch your stuff, Mike.
I insist that the fifth string of the guitar shall be slightly flat, always and forever.
Yeah.
From all the
Well,
bending.
Decreed by the king.
thus it shall be going forth. Well, so we have hit some things. I mean, I'm ready to get off the show and get basically to work here. Melodyne is now, but you know, I think I may look at those upgrades. I'm going to have to start saving some money for that. The idea of getting at chords and fine tuning, I think is fascinating to me. Really, it's and then converting to MIDI now. That
It's
means
an
the
obsession, man. You're going insane, dude. You know, obsession.
Join me.
Well, it's a good time to jump in on it. Like, you know, in the past, the technology wasn't all there. The experience wasn't very smooth. Um, I wouldn't have recommended these things, you know, 10 years ago. It was a mess. But now things have really come a long way. The conversion technology has gotten so good. And when it comes to like analog to MIDI conversion, that has become so powerful that there's VST plugins. I mean, I know several guitarists who actually they play analog guitars, but they trigger synthesizers in real time. Like, and it's zero latency. Like they're hitting the chord, the keyboard is the synthesizer's playing as soon as they hit. It doesn't affect their ability to play. There's no delay that they have to compensate for in their head. We're there.
Well, all right, that VST, what is that? As a bass player, what would I plug in or buy for that?
You know who I would ask? Do you know Veronica Duzois? Her husband Louis. He's
No.
on BandLab. I'll send you his username
Okay.
over in the BandLab chat, and he's using one that came with his pod, and he says he can play it no problem. He's not having any latency issues, and
Mm.
it triggers synthesizers. Basically, just a VST you load into the rack, and everything you're playing on that track, it's running through that VST, being converted into a MIDI, and you can point that MIDI off to a synth, a soft
Wow.
synth, or a physical synth, and trigger it.
MIDI conversion
So
in
you could
real
be
time.
playing a guitar, playing a violin, or a piano for all that.
That's
Wherever
amazing.
you point it to, it's gonna make your sound.
It would be
Let's-
interesting to hear a piano sound with guitar expression.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Oh yeah. I
Yeah.
love how pianos sound with the way guitars approach chords
Mm.
makes for such a unique kind of piano sound.
Yes. Yes.
Surprised more people don't do it.
I agree. No, I think there's a world of opportunity for those that want to you know, bring their talent to it. I'll bring up something else that I bought for the fun of it, which was Easy Bass. You know that program?
I hadn't used it. No.
Yeah, I've used it.
You've used it, and I ended up, I kind of hit a wall and I stopped using it because it was too slow and clumsy. I could just play the parts faster myself, no matter what.
Yeah.
But I did. Mike and I have a friend who is like an old school songwriter, you know, and he will play the parts on his keyboard with, you know, I'm looking for a bass part like this. Well, as a joke, you know, I could take that, and if it was MIDI in particular, or if not even, I could drag it into Easy Bass and it would do a conversion, kind of like this Melodyne stuff we're talking about, right? And you could, with the basic module, you could have two different bass sounds to choose from, and it would grab it pretty well. And then I could take that and either just play it right back to them and say, this is what it would sound like on an electric bass. You sure you want that much muddle, maybe, for example, down
Yeah.
on the low end or something, right? Before I had to learn the whole, you know, 4-minute song. And like you were saying with Melodyne, sometimes I would throw it in there because he's a keyboard player and he has some sophisticated stuff going on. and he doesn't approach bass like a bass player. So there might be like double stop fifths and stuff that show up in strange places. And it would take forever by ear. And I think I've got a pretty good ear, but it would just be tedious, right? I could slap this thing into easy bass and then go right across it. And I could play it note by note as if it had broken it out almost to like a MIDI conversion, like Melodyne or something. And then the whole part was laid out in front of me. And then I could either tweak it and say, no, you need to be on an A, not a G or whatever, and then play it back for him. I could edit it instantly, or I could relearn the part myself. And in one case, I actually did a blend of the two together because it had some, I don't have a fifth, a 5-string, so I could actually get down to low C. And so I used them both. Do you guys have any experience? I know, Glenn, you're out for
And
the
that's
bass.
a good way to. That's a good way to cheat and not need a 5-string.
Oh yeah, well, no, I hate 5 strings, honestly. But I actually detune my bass. That's one of the things the bass is, D, A, D, G. Now we'll geek on bass for a minute. I move those strings anywhere I need them to be. You'll hear a lot of the soloing on the Opus stuff. It's sort of like that high note is not on in the regular range of the bass because I've tuned it up, a whole step or whatever it needs to be. I'm constantly retuning the bass, particularly down. Anyway, but with this
Oh,
gadgetry,
I just
yeah.
saw on BandLab, MIDI Guitar 2 is, thank you, the BandLab, useful. And LGULYAS is Louis on BandLab, Louis Goulias.
Mm.
But
Oh,
yeah, that's MIDI Guitar 2 is
MIDI
what he was
guitar
talking
too.
about.
Oh, okay. I'll have to look into that. So now the bass player was using MIDI guitar too?
And he also mentioned the bass version is also available. So they do have apparently a bass VST also. So
Uh-huh.
definitely worth checking out if you're a guitarist or a bassist.
Yeah. Well, I'm looking for new sounds all the time. And just
Yeah,
and
well,
even right up to the point of
this
mixing.
gives your bass
Mm.
the option of being any sound. I mean, it basically turns your bass into a MIDI controller. So
I've
the
worried a little. Can it
sound,
handle the
you're only
fretless?
limited by your synthesizers.
Yeah. Glenn, do you think it can handle
It will
the
handle any.
fretless?
The
It,
fretless,
it
yeah, sure.
it just does wave analysis,
My
so
current fretless is over
it
my
shouldn't
nephew's house.
care what you're playing through.
My current fretless is over at my sister's house for my nephew to
Yeah.
play, and
Yeah.
we have another one
I'm
at the studio in
surprised
Jersey.
you haven't gotten that back.
No, that was the only bass that they have in the house, and I mean he's got his own guitar, and but when he first started on guitar, it was one of my guitars that I brought over there and left over there for them to use. Then he got his own guitar, but now it's the only bass they have in the house is the fretless, and it's only my only other bass, so I didn't have any bass to like swap out and like give them whatever bass and take that. It was my choice would be to give them the 5-string, which is my main bass. I am tuning it all the time, but it's only because a
What a
lot of the tunes I'm
guy.
adding on to are like sometimes 30 cents shy, sometimes it's 50 cents shy, like right between C and B, and it's like I'm just trying to tune to whatever they have by ear, and then record something for the parts.
Well, that's another whole topic, right, Glenn? Because as bass players, we can collab with people very quickly, right, all over the
Yeah,
platform.
yeah,
But man,
Yeah, you guys are great.
it's fun. The bass lends itself to it, but yeah, you do a real double take on some of the tracks that you get, like the tuning and never mind tempo and other things. I call it on grid or not. And we touched
yeah,
on that before. And
yeah,
some of it is absolutely mind boggling. You know, the Grateful Dead, as we said before, is supposed to, it's part of the vibe. It's supposed to move in and around.
the ebb and flow. Yeah, yeah. And that's the
Well,
thing
wait
is
a
for
minute.
me.
Wait a minute. Not.
Oh, I woke up.
Come on.
No, it's all good.
Oh.
For me, the Grateful Dead stuff is like it's not about being on the grid, like you said. It's about the feel and like speeding up and slowing down. And for me, the timing isn't as important. Like I can pick up on the timing what's going on, but for the tuning, it is one thing. Like everybody has to be the same tuning. Like I don't care if we're gonna all be 30 cents short or all 20 cents sharp, but we're all got to be in the same place.
Just
Like
be synchronized.
Yeah, until
I wanted to mention regarding it's not just the Grateful Dead. I studied with the timpanist for the Metropolitan Opera, and there's a band of 100 people that have to get in sync on the same pitch. And I
Yeah.
remember, I'll never forget what he said to me, because I'm studying timpani with him, and we have to be in tune with everyone. And he just said, when the brass come in at triple pianissimo, they're always flat. And so you have to
Super
come,
soft. Yeah.
yeah, you have to come down a little bit to match their. You can't
And you
fight them.
gotta compensate to the brass. No, you have to compensate
Yeah, correct,
to the
correct. And
brass.
therefore,
Or sax. Those
Melodyne's
instruments
not
that
the,
are tuned.
Melodyne's not the answer, man.
Too late, Mike.
Nope. Oh,
No, but there.
one other note, Ian,
Yeah.
Yeah.
the Band Lab mentioned you get both those plugins if you buy one. So there's some interesting incentive. If you're going to
All right.
try one of them, if you try the bass one, you'll get the guitar one. If you try the guitar one, you'll get the bass one. So, hey.
I'm gonna back up and write that down, and maybe other people will like it too. The actual name of the VST, you would order it as what? It's called?
They're bandline plugins.
MIDI guitar,
No?
MIDI guitar
Oh.
2. MIDI
MIDI.
guitar
Oh.
2. No,
Okay.
these are VSTs. They
Oh,
come
got
with
it.
certain hardware. So like, I know Louis got his with his pod. So next time, if you're ever buying a new piece of, hardware for your guitar or your bass, look at those little add-ons that they come with, because you might find that it actually comes with something you might be getting anyway.
Yes, right. No, well, I'll look for that if it's not
Today's
too
effects
much money.
processors are, today's effects processors are really integrating more and more
Yeah.
with the software. You're seeing these hardware, guitar effects processors that can run as VSTs inside your DAW and integrate with your hardware.
Yes. Yeah, I know an engineer that has some of those. They're very expensive. I'm not a guitar player, but these guys are really geek out over pedals. And I don't know, he's got something down there, some kind of like $10,000 box or something that is, I don't know, I should get the name of it, but Mike, I'm talking about John and the sounds that he gets for Jeff, the guitar player. And they can dial in any fine-tuned Hendrix sound or anything you could imagine on the planet on this thing. And it's a box that they use in the studio. They run like every guitar
those
through it.
pods, some of those pods come with like presets for every kind of killer guitarist and song that they've ever done.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
I'm impressed with where effects processors have gone these days.
And some of what you're saying is, I think I heard him say that some of it is a hybrid, like VST kind of idea. It's not just the old school analog or
Well, that's your best choice
digital.
these days. Something that's versatile enough to grow outside of its own shell. Because in the old days, you bought an effects processor for a guitar, you were locked in on that, and like sometimes you couldn't even get more presets into it. Like in the old days, they were like wanting you to buy a new box every couple of years, but they've really like turned these into computers, and being able to download tons of new effects and processes into it is the norm now.
Yeah. So you can take the show on the road, I suppose. That's the advantage for the guitar player, right? Plugs
Well,
it
that's the
in his
main reason
Marshall.
why people get those in the first place.
Yeah.
They get these because they want to be able to do that stuff on stage and still get the versatility of like what you would get if you were at the studio in the computer.
Yes, absolutely. No, well, we've covered some great stuff there. Things I can actually use. Mike, do you have any questions over there?
How about you some MIDI guitar 2 thing?
Oh, I could probably look that up. Probably changes all through the year. You ever notice how these sales go? Right?
Let's tell management to buy it. No, I was on another phone call. I was on hold, and during this call, and then all of a sudden they broke in and they started giving me a discount for MIDI guitar 2. It was amazing. You got
They're listening.
Voice, I take it. Yeah. Big
What's
Brother
that?
is listening. Google
Big
Voice,
Brother.
that comes built in. Soon they can read
Alexa.
your
Or
mind.
Alexis.
Yeah.
Don't say her name.
She listens.
Yeah, there's a MIDI guitar 2 free trial too. It says here.
No, I
Yeah.
don't go for trials.
Yeah, you can try this out, without. Well, it doesn't hurt with this, because for me, if I was a guitarist seriously considering it, I would want to do the trial to see if it
Mm,
actually lives up to its claims, and that's a
yes.
free way to see if it actually does what you want it to do. What we're talking about is not something that's gonna be for everybody. Depending on what kind of guitarist you are, what kind of bassist you are, you
Mm.
would want to test it. A
Yeah,
speed
I
metal
agree.
guitarist is not going to want to use a MIDI VST converter because it won't keep up with him.
Right. For me, the problem with bass is I use in the old days, you get down below a certain octave, and the tracking was just absolutely miserable for me
Yeah.
in the old days. I don't know. I'm sure this
And
is
the other
better.
problem you have with bass, the other problem that you can have is that if you're triggering samplers and things like that, bass can be more problematic than other samples because the wave shifts drastically as you start to get to extreme parts of the keyboard, and bass is always the samples where a good sampler will actually purposely sample their bass samples an octave higher. I've been noticing that with Halion. Every time I go to load a sample in my Halion sampler, I always transcribe my MIDI up an octave.
Yeah.
Otherwise, most of my samples won't go. The sample rate, the area that the bass sounds tend to work in is very limited. Like I can go maybe 1.5 octaves on most of the bass patches. So to get
Interesting.
the MIDI to fit in the area that it does work, you got to transpose it in order to. You usually are limited in how far up or down you can go with bass samples. So
Yes.
you want to be able to transpose up or down an octave in order to fit things. You'll still get the same bass sound, but you actually have to play purposely an octave higher just to trigger the sampler. Otherwise,
Yes.
the sample on that bass sound doesn't go lower.
Yes.
It's the
I
one
know what you
instrument
mean. Yeah.
of all the different sounds. It's the one instrument in a sampler where it's a little trickier. You are limited in your range because bass samples don't sound good when you go too high with them, and they
Mm.
sound really horrible when you go the other direction and they weren't sampled well.
Yes, I
It's almost
agree.
always like
Mm.
right in the middle of my keyboard where I'm trying to play to trigger those bass samples. So if I was actually playing on a bass and I was triggering a sampler like that,
Mm.
you might actually have to play an octave higher on your bass to get the same sound out of the sampler that you would normally just get right on your bass.
Yes, that's a good point. Well, we'll see if the
You know?
budget allows and time. One of the biggest problems, which is not really a problem, right, is I bought enough. I bought too much NI software, native instrument stuff, and because I got complete 13, the upgrade, and there's so many sounds, and there's so many programs on there. It's going to take me probably at least a year to find catalog in my mind after I find good sounds where they are and be able to pull them up when I need them. Um, the native system is it's immense. The library
Yeah.
it just goes for
They give
miles.
you
Yeah.
everything and the kitchen sink.
Oh yeah.
I I've been telling Glenn that's one of the reasons why I've been anxious to talk to you guys some more. I want to take an exploration through like what you got with that. The contact solution is one that I've considered several times getting.
You would
And
love
I
it.
just need I need somebody to like give me a really compelling reason because I like their approach to hardware and software solution there. That's what I'm looking for. I want hardware with my software when it comes to the music stuff.
and and I come at it from an artist side. Like I said, I still use GarageBand because I need to get ideas out quickly. And the NI system works well for me because I got their
Yeah.
complete keyboard right, which flawlessly interfaces with it. And you can dial in the
Yeah,
sounds. Yeah,
that's the most compelling. That's the most
yeah.
compelling reason for me to want it.
And if you, the thing is the way it's organized, when you're talking about 10,000 sounds, you,
Mm,
it's overwhelming. So they break it down so that obviously you're searching on bass or stringed instruments or percussion or whatever it is. And then
yeah.
from there, some people could use it this way. They'll say, do you want a evolving sound? They put like almost emotional words to it, and then it'll fine tune,
Yeah.
knock them down, filter it out, right? Then you're choosing from only 50 violin sounds or something. It can be
Yeah,
overwhelming.
and it's those filtration systems
Yes.
that is a big key to the good samplers. The one that I use, Halion, has the same approach where you have your basic categories of instruments, you know, winds, brasses, you know,
Mm,
your typical categories. And then after that, as you drill down from there, you start to if I go to bass, in the
okay.
subcategories, I've got acoustics, I've got electrics, I've got synths, others, you know, so you start to narrow in on what kind of bass you're looking for. Same with guitars. Um,
Yes.
the the filtration system is a big key to a great sampler because yeah, these days they come with 10,000 sounds. How are you going to find them real fast? How are you going to find the one that does the job for what you're looking for? And the reason why I ended up going with Halion back when I did was because I was like, wow, I I can find a certain kind of sound that I'm looking for in minutes based
Yes.
on a group of instruments or based on, you know, certain descriptive terms, ambience, you
Yes.
know, industrial. Once you get past the general categories, you can go into those kind of mood categories.
Yes. And then
And you don't have to
sometimes
spend months going through every sound.
that's right. So it's organized and it's easy to use. That's a plus. Now there's another side to it. They have their own standalone. It's a little complicated to describe it, but it's called Complete Six or something. Have you ever heard about this? So
Yeah.
you can come in through the keyboard, and all the programs are accessible there, but you can also go to the standalone. So if I want to, I have, you said before you were going to ask me about my programs. I have like Middle East, India. I have a lot of world sounds in there. I have a lot of
Yeah.
vocal.
Those some of those samples are so cool. Yeah.
Well, they're just begging to be used, and
Mm.
it's like I have to write
Especially
more
with the kind of
material.
music you do.
Yes.
The music you do is begging for more world instruments.
Well, VNI is calling me. And whenever I need inspiration, you just go over there. So I'm saying you can go over to the standalone platform and just say, today, I'm going to take an hour and explore these African drum sounds or this Cuban thing and not get lost on the keyboard. I'm just going to stay right there. What is the difference? How does the mixer work with their ensembles? Uh, Drill down, play with it like a kid would play with it. And it kind of goes in the back of your head when you need it later, when you're saying, I'm looking for that groove. Is it the Cuban thing? No, it's not there. It's over on the other side. And then you find it on the keyboard side, with the VST, the typical thing, when I need it quickly. But you've got to delegate some time to go into the standalone, I believe, and explore each one of the modules and just play with it
Yeah.
and
Is
not
it
expect to use it.
easier?
Yeah.
Is it easier to explore in the standalone? Because that is true. Like when you're using something in a VST, sometimes you don't get the same library access or the ease of access that
That's
you
true.
would with the standalone.
Sometimes it's an
And
advantage.
that I can see that I can see that with contact. Yeah, I could
Yeah.
see that with the contacts. In the old days, I've used to use contact way back when and I first came out, and
Mm.
sometimes it was like unless you were doing it in the standalone, it was kind of hard to work with.
It still can be a little daunting at times, and I'm talking like I really know the program. I've only scratched the surface of how to use this. I should be watching videos every day on YouTube of how to use it better. I often learn from people when you watch the soundtrack people, for movies. To me, they're about the highest level of all this in terms of merging the creativity with the technical now. And that's kind of what I aspire to. I don't, to sound more humble, we're certainly not on that level of what we're trying to do here with our Opus stuff. But I try to borrow from those ideas, and I consider them, because they're mostly instrumental, to be soundtracks, right? So I'm trying to do it in a 3 to 5 minute or 7 minute window. There's a theme. I try to work on it. And then I use, like an artist, I have all the palette and all the paints in front of me. And that now is the massive NI system, which is in the history of the world. There's never been an opportunity like this to have that much um, sound and creativity at your
Arsenal, sonic
fingertips.
arsenal.
That's right.
Hmm.
So it's almost overwhelming. Sometimes I look at our Opus, Michael send me over something that's 5 or 7 minutes. And then my goal is to put 50 good ideas into 5 minutes. And with the NI, and I start with the analog, the fretless bass to get all the melodies, because from my inner self, they come out faster through the fretless. It's like my way of singing. And so I map that out, and then I go back to fill in all the tonal aspects. Or if I'm going to double it with I'd like to double my bass with Middle Eastern strings, and they're slightly flat in some ways, purposely, right? So the more
Yeah.
you use it, as you're writing the melody, you think right away, it's going to go with that string sound, for example. And the more you do it, the faster you get, so that the NI becomes almost an
Oh yeah.
instrument that you're playing, right? And
Nowadays, I'm actually planning out my patches as I'm still laying, as I'm preparing my MIDI tracks and
yes,
just getting ready to do bouncing. I'm already thinking of like which patches I've gotten so used to like all my sounds that I can almost instantly like say this track I'm going to use this violin case patch, and this one I'm going to use this Titan's Throne
yes,
chorus, and that's the beauty of as you get completely familiar with the whole library, you can snap out like
yes.
masterpieces really fast.
Mm,
It takes a long time to get comfortable with a massive library you don't assimilate to overnight, but after a year and a half of
mm,
remastering 1200 plus songs
yeah.
and going through patch opportunities, I know every guitar, I know every horn, I know every string, every chorus sound, um, you name it. I know my synthesizers like the back of my hand now.
Yes, I'm impressed really with the way you've broken that down. And I try, when I listen to your tracks, I try to think of it the way that you are hearing it and assembling it, because there's a massive amount of data and choices and things that you have to do to produce those
There's a lot of
tracks.
tracks in there.
Yeah, there are.
Most of my average project is 40 to 60 average, and sometimes on the more complex pieces it can go over 100 tracks. A
Yeah.
lot of layering that goes on. um, I like to do subliminal layers where like that you don't necessarily hear this instrument up front,
Yeah.
but sometimes I'll do like layers where it's just in the back to provide like a resonance in some
Yes.
cases, just to fatten something. uh, do a lot of
Yes.
experimenting with different levels of instruments.
Yes. Well, I'm trying to do the same thing. Basically, I do a lot of doublings. I'll put something that starts on a bass. It may end up 3 octaves higher later on a flute or something else. And I'm
Yeah.
looking for blending those tonal things. Sometimes the bass will be pushing the beat. I'll actually drag the other guy back a little to broaden the sound. There's so many things that once you get those tracks in front of you, ours are usually about 30 tracks on an opus. And sometimes I get to the mixing stage and I hold my hands up to my head and say, what have I done? It's overwhelming. And I have to actually mix.
Now,
We
do
could talk
you
about, yeah.
when you're mixing, when you're mixing and you have all those tracks, do you color code?
Yes.
Do you do anything to make it a little easier? Because that's one thing that I've started to do because when it gets really monstrous, but it's something that I just haven't done as much as I should considering how many tracks I'm dealing with. Because it seems to be work, like what,
Oh,
especially when
yeah.
I'm still in the process of making them. But the need to start color coding so I can see like my guitars are, pink and
Yes.
my cellos are blue, and I'm seeing more and more of a need for that as
As your
the
complexity,
tracks keep blowing up.
well, here's what I do, and it may not work for everybody, but I divide my time into two parts. There's the creative time where I want to plug in and I want to get those ideas out as fast as possible. That's a creative time. Then
Yeah,
there's the other
and
time
that's when
where,
I'm not color coding. When I'm
right,
slapping them in there isn't when I'm trying to organize them.
absolutely. And that for me, GarageBand is just such a winner. Just open up another track, boom, boom, boom. I'll just rattle off 5 bass takes. I just improvising. Then I listen to them. I take the best pieces from them, and then I try to play that through, and then I assemble parts, whatever it takes. But that's creative fun time. I don't want to be hung up with any technical issues.
It is the
That
fun time.
Yeah, that, and I do that first thing in the morning typically. I get up at about 4 or 5 in the morning and I come down, make the coffee, I'm groggy, and then wake up and that's when I want to get the ideas out quickly and directly before I start thinking about I got to pay my mortgage, right? So, and then if something else changes and I get more into what I call the real world, that's where I go back and I start organizing this mess that I've created. And what I do is the first thing is labeling the tracks. So clearly it's going to say,
Well, now that I
yeah,
do as I go.
and that's
That
an
I
old
learned a long
engineer's,
time ago. In the old
right.
days, I didn't label. I was thinking like, ah, I know what is what. But as soon as you start to get more than 10, 15, labeling is something I do as I go along. Color coding and things like that, the additional organizing.
Mm.
The only
It,
time I tend to do it is if I'm either going into a vocal phase and now I'm done with the instruments and I'm now
yes,
making vocals, or if it's something that I'm going to be giving to somebody else. If I am giving a source file to somebody to work on, I like to be considerate because hey, they don't know my organization, so it's good to color code and straighten it out
yes.
for the person who's going to have to work on my mess.
And I think I
But
said
if it's
this
just
last
me,
time.
and
Yeah.
and I think I'm the only one who's going to look at the source file, I don't color code and separate. I do organize a certain way. I always put my bass tracks at the top, guitars. I put
Yes.
certain instruments in the order, and I'm so used to it at this point that that's what I expect as I look across my console. I'll see my basses,
Yes.
my guitars, my brasses.
And I use the same color code system so that, for example, all the drums are yellow. And this is easy on GarageBand to put the colors on very quickly. And I use the same yellow. The bass is the next, cousin. So that goes in at orange. And then I work myself up the color spectrum so that I can see them. Red is usually my lead singer or instrument. So I colorize them. And I also use the silly little icons on the side that looks like a drum set or whatever it is,
Yeah,
because I'm a very visual person and I want to
I've
be
been
able to,
starting to do that too. Yeah.
yeah, it seemed like a stupid gimmick when I started. Now I
Yeah, the
rely on it.
icons, well, it's nice when I mean if I know my color coding, I don't need the icons, but if I don't do the color coding, sometimes the icons help me the most to
Yeah,
just so I know the difference between where this instrument starts and then the next instrument. I might not icon each track, but I
right.
will icon each dominant track where I change from like guitars, 6 tracks, and then the seventh track is now strings. Well, I'll put a string icon on that seventh one so that way I
Yes.
know where the guitars end.
Exactly. And we all get our little systems together, but I use those tools so that I can organize, trying to build towards what to me is the biggest headache, which is the mixing stage. And so it's the layers of the cake. So I'm producing musically, the artistically, and putting it in, but I'm also trying to set up for that to be the engineer, which is my weakest point. And so I try to enable that guy. So they're color coded. Those bass parts are lumped together, and I might have synth in there, a handful of fretless basses that are playing in the upper register, and I label them exactly that. It'll say fretless upper melody, second harmony, or whatever it may be, and then it's color coded. But then this is something else I touched on before. If I'm working with someone else on BandLab, even more so, I get in on the actual section of the track, say the verse, and you can rename that little section, right? And I think you can do it on all the DAWs. So it will say verse, bass. And if there are different takes
Oh,
of
you named the clips,
the region,
the
yeah,
clip names.
yes, I do. So they're verse, chorus, or whatever they are.
I
So
say
if I,
you're a lot more considerate than I am. I never thought of that actually. The clip names could be useful. I usually hide them in Cakewalk. I don't like to see them because sometimes they cover data that I want to see in the MIDI. So
yes, true.
using names like that is actually a good way to make that useful.
I even rank my takes, especially when I'm play. I did something with Thatch Lung guy, the drummer from England, and so I ended up playing lead guitar on the thing, which I'm hesitant to do, but it came out pretty well. But I had to rank my takes, and I actually do that. I'll say, best, uh, best solo, okay, so, pitchy, whatever it may be. And so any mental note that I'm taking, I put it into the loop itself so that I don't have to go over when I'm looking at 5 versions of the solo and
Yeah.
reinvent the wheel every time. And then go ahead if you want to comment on that, but
Well,
the other,
I think any way that you incorporate notes into
mm,
whether there's an actual place to put the notes, like on the online editor, they got their little notes section. It's
yeah,
not as useful because it's off to the side, but being able to incorporate notes into
mm.
your sections like that is a great way to
And there's
keep
another
track of
reason.
things that you might not be able to all keep up here.
There's another reason that I do it is that now remember I talked about in GarageBand or the Apple products, you can use track arranger, right? So that intro, you click on this feature, it runs it across the top. So the first 4 bars, intro, 8 verse, chorus, bridge, et cetera, and you can make up names for each of the sections, right? And that's a great way of sort of vertically arranging what you have. But I go a step beyond that. I put custom notes into the track arrangement, the header, so it will say verse, and I'll put the chords in there. Because say I'm blowing through it on a
Oh,
keyboard.
see, that's for somebody who's going to be playing afterwards. That's very considerate. If that source file is going to say me and I want to know what's being played. I love if somebody gives me a source file like that and actually tells me what I need to know
Well, the
without me
problem,
having to go run Melodyne or
yeah, that's right.
figure it out.
Well, the problem I have though is, see, I'm working in the Apple format that has the tabs, but as soon as I move it over to BandLab and upload that track or pieces of the track,
Oh, I
I'm
think your
gonna,
mic went down there a little,
oh,
Ian.
sorry. Can you hear me
There
okay?
you go.
Yeah.
That was
Yep,
that was
you're
God
back.
intervening at
He's
that
trying to get
point.
me to shut up here, but this is the geek
Thank you,
session.
Lord.
So
Thank you, Lord. Thank you, Lord.
you want to geek out for a while, Mike? So I'll finish this idea. Is that if I'm going to take stuff and then put it on BandLab and then share it and work with other people, I will actually rename those clips and even break up perhaps the bass part, so that people. My problem with the online editor in BandLab is that to me the graphic is kind of fuzzy. It's really hard to do strict editing, and you don't have an arrangement track so everybody can agree where to line the song up to start with, and then when you
Yeah,
get out to the
yeah.
third verse, people are like, oh, some guys are like, oh, that's minute 2 minutes and 15. Other guys are, oh, that's measure 34. It's like, for God's sake,
Yeah.
you know, we're not even
Everybody's looking at a different time,
right. So sometimes
even
what
though
I
it's the same time.
right. So I go up there and I will often organize their track or for the band. And I will do even a dummy track where I'll take what I call their guide track, like their guitar part. I will duplicate it and mute it. And then what I will actually put lines where dividing where the verse, the chorus, and the bridge are, so that you can see it's like a bogus arrangement track. And if I want to go one step further, I can
See,
now take,
that's
yeah, I
again,
can,
that's considerate.
well, it's
Putting that is considerate for
organization.
others. It's like using markers.
Yes,
Markers are really useful. I don't understand why people don't use them more, especially when you're composing and writing stuff,
right,
to let the others that are going to be working on it know, like, this is the bridge, this is the verse
right,
2, verse 3. All those markers can save you a lot of time later, especially if you want
exactly.
to jump around.
And
With Cakewalk, you bring up the
yeah,
marker editor, you can just click verse 2 and boom, the timeline goes where you want it to. Super useful.
can you do that on the web version? I haven't seen that. The
Um,
band lab.
no, and I wish they would. BandLab, if you're listening, get markers into that online editor. There's no reason or excuse not to. It's not a hard function, and it's the one thing that would make the online editor a lot more useful.
And you'd save me all this
If
work
for
that I'm
nothing
talking
else,
about.
just for notes. If for
Yeah.
nothing else, just for notes, because you notice, like, if you go to if you play a song on BandLab in the project page, if you write a comment at the right time, you'll notice it puts a little dot under the wave for where you wrote the comment. So that way people can make comments on a specific part of the song,
Oh, that's
which
cool.
is useful. Like if I want to say, like, this bridge was kick ass, then I jump to that bridge, and when I go start typing my comment, that little dot is up there, and the user can roll over those dots and see, oh, so and so made a comment. This is what they were talking about because they wrote the comment at 3 minutes and 15 seconds.
Oh, wow.
They've already got this in
Yeah.
there
Yeah.
for commenting, but in the online editor, there's no markers to be seen anywhere. And it would be awesome to be able to drop a marker in the online editor and say,
Mm.
this is where I want you to work on something. Comments
Hmm.
for other collaborators would be super useful. Or just to indicate a part in the song. This is the bridge. This is the verse. If
Yes.
I didn't know your song and you're showing it to me, being able to see at the top, like, this is what you interpret as your pieces. Well, now I know what I need to learn. He's got a verse, a bridge, and a chorus. I need to learn these three different parts. And once I've learned the parts, then I need to repeat them the way that they're marked up there. It
But
will speed up things.
well, you've come up with a solution of all my workarounds right there. Yeah. Talk
Yeah.
to somebody there.
I've
Get that
I've
in.
worked around this too. The fact that these things weren't in there, I've worked around them too to some extent. But the marker one, I've never found an effective workaround for it. They just need to implement it. It's like, they know the power of markers. They do it in Cakewalk perfectly. They just need to incorporate how it works in Cakewalk to
Mm.
their online editor. And if they do, it's one of the things that for collaboration and things like that, that would be super useful.
One thing that we did
Or
talk about
simply to
once,
put a marker for each chord.
one thing we did talk about was adding a track that doesn't have any music on it that you could just add, you could just put a blank, track the whole way and just chop it anywhere you want to, and a new title everywhere you chop it because
Yeah.
it's a new file. So
Yes.
you could technically
Mhm.
use that
See,
to
and
put markers in.
that's the genius of Glenn's. That's the genius of Glenn there, because that is the workaround, I guess, for now. If I did want to make these visual indicators, I would do just like that. That's thinking out the box, Glenn.
Yeah.
Gotta do it.
Just put a blank clip in there. Give it a name.
Want to hear
Again, chop it anywhere you want to put a new name.
an idea from my friend Mike there, if he's still awake? I'll speak for him because I speak twice as much. Mike, are you there?
I fall asleep whenever you start
Yes.
talking, right?
All right, so go back to sleep. Here's something he did for me. You're going to get a laugh out of this, and it was brilliant. He wanted me to understand a song, just the range of what it was. Like you could only describe it, like basically you couldn't even type it out. This song is about this. We're going to swell here. Here's the bridge. Here's the that. He spoke all the instructions right into a track and put the track up on BandLab. I don't know if you remember this, Mike. And so I could play the track and listen.
Again, thinking out the box.
Right.
Yep.
He's giving
Love
me
that, Mike.
instructions.
Most of my tracks are empty and just me talking about things. And
He's
I miss the days.
delegating.
I miss
It's
the
like-
days when I used to just hit things for a living.
Yeah,
Those
as a
are the
drummer.
days. Yeah.
But now he can delegate. He can say, Ian, I want you to do all these following things here. Now don't disturb me for a week. So, he can give me instructions. So, I mean, it's a great way to communicate to people. Everybody's got a microphone.
I
Why
got
not just
that
tell
from
them?
I got that from Glenn. By the way.
Nice.
Yeah.
And this is the part in this part of the song is where the killer guitar solo goes, and then over
That's
here you
right.
do this.
Exactly. This is where I'm turning you way down in the mix, and I'm going to take the solo. Yeah. Yeah, it's collaboration. You learn a lot. There's the workarounds, there's the pain of it. But, in some ways, you think back, we're all old enough to have played in actual bands. Imagine that.
Yeah.
Where you went into a room and practiced with people, and you had to communicate all this stuff, right? As a collab. That was the first collab, but it's instantaneous. You look at the drummer, you go, no, that's not working. Or he looks at me, you're behind him. I'm picking on you, trying to wake you up there.
Hey.
And so he'll give me instruction, but the singer's over on the other side of the room talking to the guitar player saying, you got to turn down, or you're out of tune, or, whatever it is. And then you have to someone counts off the song. You got to bring it all together. You got to listen as you play. Maybe you record it and you refine it. This is the way we used to write material. Someone would bring in a song and the others would have to arrange it and then sort of produce it right on the fly as you're working. But now we try to replicate that entire process up online with the collaboration, right? And
Yeah.
it's a new world.
With a different approach there. Still the same goals. I mean, we're still doing the same thing we did in the band rooms and in the old band days, but we're taking different approaches to how we accomplish it.
Yes.
You have new obstacles with online collaboration. You have a lot of new abilities and you can really think out a song in a way that you couldn't when you were under pressure. Like, oh, band practice for the next 2 hours. Got to smooth it out now. Now we have these luxuries of like you can do it for days if necessary. But at the same time, we're still trying to accomplish the same thing of getting from the beginning to the end of a creative process.
Yes. Yeah,
And doing it together.
that's it.
Doing it in a way that like everybody's on the same channel and on the same track.
Right. And just like in the band practices of the old days, you'd have different kinds of people with personalities, right? And some
Different
guys
drugs.
who woke that guy? And so, for example, and you'd have to, you'd almost be shouting at each other and, because people couldn't communicate. And after 3 hours of practice, you're tired and punchy. And maybe one guy's had too many beers, and you're trying to communicate.
I miss those days when we would
Mike,
fight.
all of my drummers, all of my drummers.
It's a touchy subject, bringing up drummers, Tony, be careful there.
Well, that's the only reason I got into recording is because you guys took forever to tune up. Come on, let's face it.
You actually got more done singing and then suddenly playing all the tracks on a 4-track back then. Then it was, we had one at that point, a 5-piece band, Tony, and we all wrote songs, some of us more than others, and you'd bring it down into this hodgepodge, right? Where you had 2 hours slated to rehearsal. there's a gig on Friday. This is like in Boston, and it's original music, and you have to look like you hopefully know what you're doing. And you had to hash out all this arrangement in 2 hours. And then one guy will be like, okay, we've worked on your song long enough. Now we need to work on my song, you know? And
Okay, another 2 hours.
oh my God. And the priorities constantly shifting. Who's leading the band, right? Who is the leader? Is it the singer? But sometimes the leader on the stage is not the person who's writing the material or running the rehearsal. Right?
Bingo. Yeah, that's a big key. Like the leader on the stage is not always the leader in the material.
Yes. And it's often.
It's not actually
Mhm.
typical that the leader on the stage would be the one writing the material, because
Right.
most singers don't write the band's songs, at least in
Right.
normal bands, at least that we grew up with. The singers weren't the ones writing the songs.
Like I always think like
Very
Led
rarely.
Zeppelin, like, you know, Robert Plant is like the icing on the cake.
Well, there
He's a fundamental part of it. I mean,
he had some involvement. Yeah,
yeah, but they're going to hash
he
it
had more
out.
involvement than a lot of singers back then.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, well, he's not going to tell Jimmy what to play.
No,
I guarantee
exactly.
you.
And you know that John Paul has got to be looking over at the drummer and Page and saying, you know, that doesn't work, you know, and we're going to have to change the key.
and John Paul was like the typical
Yeah.
like professional musician and bassist who could work with anything. I mean, when you look at the dynamics there, that is what, like, you know, makes up the kinds of bands that we grew up with, and the dynamics that you had, how drummers are, how bassists are, how the guitarist is, how the singer is.
Yeah.
Led Zeppelin is a good example of what every band I was ever in was like.
It's a great
God,
formula.
I miss the anger. I really do.
Anger of what? Rehearsals?
Everything, you know, playing, fighting.
Well, there was
One
more
thing-
Sometimes
drama.
Sometimes that anger brought out some of our best jams.
True.
Yeah, one thing I noticed I'll mention as a slight aside, break this thing up, is when I had to teach math and computer science online for like whatever 16 months because of COVID, right? And the one thing I really missed was I didn't know who to yell at. Everyone was equal. It was really it was disgusting. My students, I'm talking. Like, who do I yell at? Who can I get angry at?
Angry? You're the professor.
Yeah.
You're supposed to be setting a good example.
Get back to that lesson. Anyway.
He's kidding. He's not a yeller, actually. But I think the online experience, what he's saying in the classroom, it shook everything up. It changed all the dynamics, just as it has in the music business now. Is it going to go back to the way it was? Or are we going to live with some kind of hybrid going forward?
We have started doing some live
Well,
gigs again,
you're seeing.
What's that, Glenn?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've started getting some live
Some
gigs
music is getting back to normal. Yeah.
And
Yeah,
you're doing
Glenn
live
covers them
gigs
on the
in New
weekends.
Jersey, Glenn?
Yep, New
Glenn
Jersey
does
and
lights, sound.
lights and sound, and sometimes I perform with a couple of the bands that I've been in for 12 years. But
Nice.
we don't do a lot of gigs. We do a handful of gigs each every year. But the last couple of years we haven't, or the last year at least we haven't. But I've been doing the sound gigs and the light gigs. Like this weekend we have 3 gigs coming up. Me and my buddy Mike do sound, and I'll be doing lights on Friday. So I'm doing
Awesome.
lights Friday, and then we're doing sound on Saturday and Sunday.
And I think, like with Mike here, you know, on the line here, he was telling me last weekend, he's almost afraid to go back into the live environment, or, you know, you have to remember how to teach. And I think I don't play out live anymore, honestly, but if I did have to get back on stage,
I haven't in
this,
15 years.
yeah, I'd be terrified at this point after a year of COVID and band lab to say, is it like a bicycle? Is it all going to come back to me? You know, am I going to freeze up on stage?
It does
know,
all come back. I mean, preparation is always important, but the other thing is just find an open mic somewhere nearby. And that's the thing, is like I've found a few around here and just, you know, went a couple times with the band, so that made it easier. But, you know, with my band, like we just went to an open mic and had, you know, 3-4 songs prepared and just went.
How did it go? How did it feel?
Perfect.
Oh, it was awesome. We ripped the doors off the place. It was nice. We went
Must
back
be great.
3 or 4 weeks in a row.
pent up
Yeah.
energy and stuff to perform. And
Yep, as a new crowd, and they hadn't seen us before, so it was, they had just, we gave them, I think, 3 or 4 songs, different songs each week for 3 or 4 weeks in a row.
nice.
That's great. Yeah.
Yeah, I kind of miss that side of it.
Humans.
Human interaction. Yeah.
Like I
But
said,
you know,
I play the 5-string bass, so it's, I get those low notes out there sometimes. I try not to get down there too often, but yeah, that low C, the low B, I can, get that note ringing out, and it just really, the ball, you get that, brings it out in the chest.
and you're running through like a PA with subwoofers or the giant PA system.
It depends on the bar. Like this place was not huge, but all I did is I just brought my
Yeah,
little Tech
these are
21
places
Sansamp box.
that have their.
So it's just the bass and the little box. And then
Okay.
the box is just straight out to it's an XLR cable straight out to the sound guy, and he can just control everything from there.
Oh, nice simple setup.
Yeah,
Yeah.
simple
Pump it
setup,
out
because if
whatever speakers they have.
anything else that I would bring would be probably too much, but also they did have a bass stack in the corner, and I started just taking both outs from the little Sansamp box, one going to the sound guy so he could do whatever, and the other going to the little bass stack so that my guitar player could use it as a monitor for them to hear the bass better, because it was right between him and the drummer.
All
That's
kinds of
great.
different concerns live about hearing everybody equally. Yeah.
Oh God.
Very
yes.
different.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
But this way, with that little box,
I would.
we're able to set it so that he can do the house over there, and we can have this one over here where the guitar player has his own control for him and the drummer. So it
Nice.
worked out well.
Mm,
Yeah.
Yeah,
very
for
cool.
all the skills you might have in, say, a studio, almost none of those apply when you're talking about producing sound on the fly like that. You know, performing sound knowledge is a whole bigger world of knowledge, and you have to be able to do it at different locations. It's the hardest part of the musical knowledge that I've ever learned, and it's the one I have the least practice with. It's easy to get a sound when you have a controlled environment and you can make sure that everything sounds the way it's supposed to and you have the time. But doing that in a setup, getting this band up there and getting a certain sound is an art form.
It's a real pleasure working with people who have a good sense of dynamics, because when you
yeah.
get into those situations where everybody needs to hear everybody, like people can tell if somebody's too loud, and like that person can just bring their touch down a little bit, without having to go adjusting anything. You can just, play a little bit softer, play a little bit quieter. Everybody has the control to do that. But some bands, they don't do that. Like some bands, you're like, that one guy is always just going to be too loud, right? But most bands that I'm in, like, everybody listens to everybody, and everybody knows where they are in the mix and can bring it up or down to fit everything where it should.
Mike, that's a great concept. Dynamics.
Ooh,
The trick is to play really quietly in the sound check.
shots fired.
Is that how you turn it up to 11? By
Yep.
calibrating it and making it a little lower so when they set you, you can turn it to 11?
Exactly.
Oh yeah.
You know the
I
secret.
think that's every lead guitar player's trick, right? They've always got their hand down on that volume. It's like, yeah, are we set? Yeah, we're set, right? But you ever notice whenever the solo comes, and if you're playing like in the, and these are some of the best guitar players I play with, that thing just keeps creeping up somehow, and by the time I'm done with the set as a bass player, I can't hear anything. My ears are ringing, and I certainly can't hear the bass anymore. You know what I mean? It's sort of like, how the
Yeah,
hell did that guitar
bass
player double in
disappears.
volume?
Yeah, bass disappears. Even when you have monitors, bass can
Yeah.
disappear on you. I mean, most of my parts on the keyboard, I tended to play more bass parts than high parts, and I didn't have monitors in the old days, so I never heard myself on stage. I was always playing blind.
Yeah. It's
Yeah,
because
it's
the
scary.
throw of the bass, it throws out, its focal point is out in the audience usually, right?
Chances are all the sound you're hearing when you're on stage, as far as the stuff around you, is either those guitars who are really loud, because I always had guitarists who did like to go to 11, and my drums. The drums and the guitar would end up drowning out any other sound going on. So it was tough for me. I either had to follow the guitarist or, try to follow with the drums as long as I could get,
Mm.
as long as my drummer could stay in time. because they do like to drink.
Well,
Uh,
bass
hey,
players should be felt and not heard.
oh,
A bass
easy
player.
now. That's what our
That's
old
true,
teacher
though.
used to
Get that
say.
thump coming
Yeah,
out. Yeah, yeah.
You feel it in
that
your
is true.
gut. Well, you know what I used to do in really loud setups, and sometimes playing with Mike is if it got so loud on stage, I would actually physically stand with my in front of the drum set with my leg touching the front of the kick drum. Uh, you know, that's where it starts for me as a bass player from the kick. And I don't know. When it got loud, I need to get closer to the drums. I need to
I
feel
thought
them.
that was part of the show, man.
It was part of the show. Of course it was.
Sometimes it is.
He thought you were trying to mute him.
Yeah. No, I'm blocking him so the girls can see me, not him. It
There you go.
worked every time.
Didn't you get the point when I started throwing drumsticks at you?
No,
Didn't you
I don't.
you never got that? Yeah.
I
Right.
never felt any of them.
Yeah.
He actually did. We could tell you stories live. That guy that couldn't get his credit card to work with my pay thing today, with the tip jar. That guy, he works for Apple now, right? He used to be our guitar player, and I can remember a gig out on the Cape where Mike was throwing drumsticks across the stage at the guitar player. It was,
Nice.
yeah, that great show, right? That was the days where you would go down to the Cape and play for 6 days straight at one of these party beach places. And on the seventh day, you basically drive to the next location, set up and
God
play
rested.
6 more days. And you do that for a summer, and you're so punchy and crazed, and everyone's drinking far too much at that point, playing video games all day, sleeping till 2 o'clock,
Sign
in the
me up.
afternoon. Yes, I mean,
Yeah.
the good old days. But yeah, there were some wild times back then. You're not going to replicate that on BandLab.
Well, you
Yeah,
heard
that
about the musicians
the
who broke down on the side of the road and they didn't have any money because they're poor musicians. So they walked, they didn't have any phones. And they saw this house and they walked toward the house and they looked in the window and they saw this dog sitting by the fireplace and this billowing smoke and the children were playing and the father was reading newspaper and the wife was bringing this beautiful, beautiful dinner and setting it down. And the one musician looks at the other one and says, how can people live like that?
Uh,
Yeah.
very
Anyway,
quietly.
yeah, where
yeah.
laugh track. Uh,
Hey,
Only that's a musician's joke, right? We've got quite a few of them. But I'm wondering if, and now I'll sound like Grandpa Walton here, but if people haven't played or come up in the band experience, whatever style music it is, and you just go straight into this band lab world, and
Yeah,
being on the
and that's a
grid.
lot.
Yeah,
For the ones you're interacting with on BandLab, the younger ones, they never had that
right.
band world. This is their experience at their first bands.
Exactly
It's
right.
going to produce different it's going to produce different kinds of music. It's going to produce different kinds of dynamics,
Yeah.
some for the better, some
Well,
some
you're
things will have to
reinventing.
make up some other way. I miss being in a room with musicians.
Me too.
I do miss that. That was part of the creativity that helped me to write stuff. Now I'm trying to duplicate my writing from then with in an empty room.
Mm.
It's very difficult.
For me, it's kind of reversed for
Got to take
writing.
from
For writing, Tony, I like to be completely alone. And I love the idea that I can go over the same 8 measures 150 times, where you could not do that in a band
true
situation. To
for
write,
refining. I
yeah,
love I love to be able to refine at that level, but for the creatives, the things that get me riffing on chords or doing something
mm,
is bouncing off of another creative type. In the old days, it was my guitarist Matt. Like I could start a riff, he could finish it.
mm,
Ange nowadays, like I've been working on some new progressions and her take on the melodies when she sings on top of it, and all of a sudden I'm thinking about these chords in a different way, and I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
she's leading my she's leading me where I want to change, where
Yeah.
I want to move the progression this way. And that's the part I miss when I'm not bouncing off of somebody else. Otherwise, I just tend to write very static construction where it's like, okay, I'm
Mm,
going to build this like a classic rock song. It's going to have a verse, a
yeah.
hook to a bridge to a chorus, and back to the verse. And, I don't want to get caught in that repetitive glut, and it's bouncing off of others, even on BandLab, that's bringing me back from that.
Yes. Yeah. It's a little of both, isn't it? I need the spark of inspiration from other people too. And that's really why, with Mike, uh, our best stuff is really together because we see things differently, but we find ways to make it better together. Right. So we bounce off each other like you are with Ange there. But some of it is because we've played in bands together for so long that we kind of have the dance down in a way, and
You
we've
know each other.
modified.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Next time I see you, I'm going to throw drumsticks at you. You realize, right?
God, that he did come up and visit me
I, w-
recently, but
I, I was
that's Tom.
fortunate to play with this. I was fortunate to play with the same guitarist and the same bassist through three, maybe four bands through the 90s.
Mm,
So even though other parts changed, the band name changed a couple of times, I played with certain individuals, and these were the ones that I learned to write with. Because back then, I wasn't a songwriter in my first couple of bands. I was just a keyboardist figuring out how to play what they were playing.
yeah,
Those ones that I continued to play with band after band after band became the ones that I developed my early writing style with, and I was fortunate to have a consistency at least with my guitarist and my bassist, the two parts that I was writing all around.
yeah,
That's important in the early days of your writing, when you're just becoming a writer, when you're saying to yourself that I am a writer. um, some consistency like that, uh, of a tennis partner, so to speak, somebody to bounce
yeah.
creatively with, is the key to becoming a songwriter. Because if it wasn't for them, I don't know if I would have even gotten into writing if I was just playing for my own ears back then.
Right. No, it's a beautiful thing, and everyone's got their own journey, in the way that they're going to develop. And um, I love what you're saying. It's making me kind of want to play in a band again, uh, but
I
I've
miss it.
adapted. Yeah, but I've
Same here.
adapted now. It's uh, the
Yeah.
collabs now that I'm doing, and with some of these younger guys, and the electronic thing. It's a different way of looking at things, and I'm kind of, I don't know, it seems to be almost the future in a way. But what I think that I'm doing is I'm kind of
Oh, it
bringing
is.
some of the old
Whether it's
world.
whether it's by choice,
Mm,
whether it's by choice or force, it is the future.
yeah.
We don't really have a choice here. This virtual collabing is the future of music making. Is the future bands.
Mm,
You'll still have the other ones, but they will be less and less. More people go to a cinema than a drive-in for a reason.
yeah. Oh yeah. Now
But
Amazon's on
drive-ins are
your own
cool.
house. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, technology is going to change it. This COVID thing, I don't know. I still don't know if this is completely over. God willing, it will be
Well,
over. But it's
COVID
just,
will eventually be over, but
mm,
fear of living and fear of
mm,
like dying if you walk out your house is always going to be there. So we have to decide how we react to things, and whether we're overreacting or underreacting. That's always the question that we need to be asking ourselves.
but the hardest
One
part for
name
music
changes to
though
another.
is that it's usually, you look back at the crowds that we used to play for. You know what I mean? Those are, that is the nightmare.
Sadly, Today's
All
kid might not get to feel like
Mm,
the joy of playing in a small club where you got hundreds of people in there.
right.
Might not get that in some of those small clubs.
The only bands
And it's
left will be
hard as fuck to get on stage.
Mm.
What's that, Mike?
the only bands left will be K-pop. That'll be it. And everyone
Yeah.
else will be virtually in their room.
Yeah, or I like the Vocaloid characters that they have there, the three-dimensional holograms that dance on the stage. Those are, you probably
Well,
don't even know about them,
s-
but
some of that might get more incorporated. You might have musicians in the future who would not have became musicians because their fear of playing in front of people,
yeah.
who might explore their music and their performance without a problem because they do it virtually with avatars. Um, uh,
Mm,
there's a couple of
Yeah.
producers out there that they're known for their nicknames. Marshmallow, like who the fuck
mm.
knows what he looks like? Every time he comes out, he has a giant marshmallow on his head. He doesn't want a public life, but he does want to make that music and do the part of it that's fun without the nervousness of performing it and having to look back at your audience. That's not for everybody.
Mm,
And some of this direction we're going in is going to open up opportunities for those who don't necessarily want to perform in front of people but do want to perform and can do it online in a way that's not like at the club, but it
mm,
still has the same feel.
mm.
A performance is a performance.
Yeah. Well, my sister's son, he's musical, he can play the guitar already. But when he went up to Boston, the whole thing was about DJing,
Mm.
and so, but it's live interactive DJing. So he's got the Ableton with the pads, and he's got all the beats and all the things around his fingers. It's quite something to see as a one-man band.
Yeah, and DJs these days, DJs are more musician than DJ. You know, in the old days, I think for us, we hear the word DJ and we think like the guy who was, spinning those records when we went to weddings or at the skating palace. Today's DJs, that term has changed in the last 10, 15 years. It is like musicians
Mm,
because there's a music ship in snips of this, snips of that, transitions, sound effects.
mm,
They're just playing a different controller, but
right.
it is all improvised music making. And some of them really improvise on the fly. Like
Yeah.
they're just sucking up. They don't even know the clips that they're sucking up, and they're just putting them at certain beats to
Mm,
mix with other things. There's a lot of layering going on there. I can't
yes.
say I understand how to be a DJ the way these guys are doing it. I do know the tricks they're doing, the looping approaches. I always understood looping. I just was never good at utilizing it for myself. I can't perform to a loop like or use a loop box, but when I see people who do it and I'm thinking like, damn, I could if I could get over this thing of mine using that, then I could sit there and just with a loop box and one instrument do some really cool stuff.
Yeah. And the it seems to be interactive with the audience. They've tied that part of it. They're not just like digitally standing back. They're using the technology to
Well, it's
rub
meant
up
to be a
against the
party.
crowd. Exactly.
It's supposed to be a party. A DJ's DJing a party, no matter what it is. So that's the purpose of it. Take that music and make them either want to dance, drink, or be merry,
Well, that may be the
right?
future also, right? I I don't know. I'm seeing this thing to tie it back to that new what's that thing you call is a sequencer they call the new development on lab band lab
The sampler.
See, saying,
sampler.
see,
Oh, the sampler. Yeah, the
Yeah.
sampler.
So if you could say you even write opus clips, I've talked about this with Mike, and say I take bass clips, and Glenn, you're doing this already, right? You can
Yep.
fill them into those little cells, I call them, or whatever they are, clips, and you can load the clips all into, say it's got to be bigger than your phone, but like, the larger pad sets, you know what I mean? So the DJ is up there, but he's playing with all the samples that maybe we're in an opus, right? For example, our entire song is programmed and it is put on the pad, right? But the guy doesn't just play our song. He could actually run the drums. He could bring in my bass solo. You can bring in the lyrics or the vocalist and run it all off of a pad on the fly, right? Improvise through.
Yeah, it's
Uh,
a part on the
yeah,
pad. It's a part.
Yes. Yeah. And so you're running all the parts so you could perform our songs. That's if the opuses were ever performed out live, I could never see a band actually playing them. It would have to be some kind of DJ
It'd be a
driven.
hell of a job to perform them.
It would be fun. Maybe I could get my nephew to do that.
You
It would
need
be interesting.
either need a big band, or you'd either need a big band or a couple of synths and a couple of people fucking busy on them.
Yeah, and why do all that, right? I think you'd use the modern technology now. It's a
Well,
third.
there, if you could, if I had enough people willing to do it, I honestly would say I would try it. But if I wanted to accomplish it and I knew that I couldn't get enough of the people you need to do it that way and do it right, doing it
Mm,
through a couple of synths or creatively to get the same sound is good. Like you might have to
mhm,
do that to
yeah.
accomplish that.
I'll bring up a technical thing, and I don't know how much time we have. Is we
Uh,
Mike and I
we got all
enable.
night. I,
I got to go to
I can
work
stop
soon.
Andrew's recording now, so I'm
You-
good till you are.
I'd probably get about 10 minutes, and I got to go to sleep to go to work tomorrow. But you're probably the only person I could ask this question to. I've seen this band called Blonde Redhead, and we recently covered one of their songs. They're down out of Brooklyn, and they're sort of came out of the art scene. And the two guys are from Berkeley, the music school, and they have this Japanese singer, right? It's a very unusual art song setup. I've seen them about 6 or 8 times because they live near me. Well, Tony, they're a three-piece that doesn't even have a bass player on stage, and somehow
Really?
yeah, and their songs, some of them are very complex with a lot of keyboard parts. They've got to be MIDI driven, but I've seen them a dozen times. I cannot figure out how they are driving all those backup sounds so flawlessly. It's like a click track that works.
Well, in those cases, sometimes it is like prepared music ahead of time, like those
Mm,
part one on this pad, part two on this pad. And, between sampling properly and triggering properly, one person can actually be like moving the music along with a whole bunch of tracks, a mixed track.
yeah.
So if you see three people in a room and you're wondering where's that sound coming from, as
Mm,
long as they got a sampler in there and somebody who knows how to trigger, whether it's pads or keys, because both
mm.
will play a sample. I can literally hold down a key and play a whole song
Yes, absolutely. And
until
I
I
mean,
let
the
the key
old
up. As soon as I
old
let the
days.
key up, it stops playing.
Yeah, right. And I can't figure out if the guitar player, who's sort of the technician in the band, if he is pre-programming all this stuff like in massive MIDI banks, or I can't tell if his
A lot
twin
of times,
brother.
so
Yeah.
today's guitar players a lot of times are doing advanced. They're like Geddy Lee style fucking setups. Today's
Yeah.
guitar players are a lot more advanced than the old school cavemen I used to jam with.
Well, this guy's got a pedal
Their
box.
their gear is more complicated. Their
Mm,
gear is more complicated than mine at this point.
yeah. Oh, yeah. And that I believe this guy's probably been playing since about the 2000s, right? And his most complex stuff was probably 2007 to 12, somewhere in there. And he's got a massive pedal box, stomp boxes, digital stuff, all at his feet. And he's not like a showy guy jumping around on guitar. These guys look like geeks, basically standing there playing. But he's always looking down at that
Yeah,
board.
Devo.
Yeah, it's something like that,
Whip it
right?
good.
It's artsy, and but he's triggering this stuff with his feet, I think. But I have never seen
Oh
such
yeah.
a coordinated sound
Um,
that is
because
massive.
most of these foot pedals these days, in the old days, you saw foot pedals in front of a guitarist, and they were little stomp boxes.
Right.
Nowadays, you see these foot pedals that are they're programmable MIDI controllers, and in some cases, they are another keyboard. They are strategically designed so it's like you have a one octave keyboard at your feet. So
Mm,
if you want to play and use it like a keyboard, it's shaped to
mm,
be like a keyboard, but at the same time can be triggering. I can be kicking this song in or playing a loop, doing all the same things you would do if you were hitting a key. But the luxury there is like you can
yeah.
click it on, do whatever you want, jump around the stage, come
Right.
back, just like you're switching distortion, but you're actually stopping the backing track that you're playing to.
And I
And
think
we've
that
come to accept like
yeah.
music coming out of a track just like we would having five people sitting there playing. If those three people are playing 10 people's worth of music,
Yeah.
they have to incorporate some backing tracks.
I
Nothing
knew it
wrong
was
with that.
what I
We've
couldn't
come to a point in music where that's the
yeah.
norm.
And I've accepted it well. I'm happy. I don't want to see a raw three-piece version of stuff that sounds like it has 15 tracks or maybe 30 tracks like Opus even at times. I want to hear the real thing.
It,
But on the other hand, I don't want to see a
if it
guy
if it sounds
vanilly.
really if it
Yeah,
sounds really cool, well, yeah, of course not. You don't want to see people doing something that they're faking. But if
right.
you are seeing three people and you hear this grand orchestra, but these three people are playing parts and they're playing those parts, they're in front of you,
Yeah.
people forget that you don't see that orchestra. If you're
Hmm.
watching this guitarist wail and you see that drummer just like going nuts, people don't care anymore that
Hmm.
some of the music is being filled in gaps
Yes,
that way. You just got to do it creatively. You do it in a way where it's not a Milli. The funny thing is Milli Vanilli these days wouldn't even have been a story because it would have been
I
like,
know it.
yeah, that's every fucking artist. Back then, it was tough for us because it was that dawn of the digital age and the beginning of like reality TV, where it's like, oh, this is meant to look like it's real.
Yeah.
That's where it felt deceptive with Milli Vanilli
Yeah.
because they
And
did come across like they could sing and they did actually sing a few things
sure,
good.
they were
They
okay.
just couldn't cover the sound that their producers were trying to represent them as.
Right. So they appeared as if they were
And it bit them in the ass to do it.
right. Oh, they were a fraud. Like you say, now it's commonplace, right? You got, like you said, real time, Melodyne. These singers they couldn't even get through one song without the digital assistance these days.
You
Uh,
have a handful of pop artists these days that couldn't hold a tune
hmm,
if you actually made them. Britney Spears actually was not a good singer in
hmm,
her early days. She became one over time, um, but in her early days, she was nasally as hell. Like
hmm.
it, any producer would be like, "Oh my God, get some breathing techniques before you sing this track because all I'm hearing is your nose singing in
Yeah,
those early songs."
yeah. Things have come a long
But
way,
they
and
they take artists like that
hmm,
all the time and turn them into a commercially successful sound with good sound engineering and a little bit of visual distraction.
oh well,
People
yeah, that's
don't
putting it
care if you
nicely.
sound like shit if you look hot in a video. Like I don't care that you sing nasally.
That's right. Well, they'll fix that anyway. They can bring in other people's voices, samples. They can do any.
Yeah.
All you need now, I think, if you're going to go the full out pop route, is cynically, I would say, is you need a good looking singer, and you need an excellent producer.
Well, it doesn't hurt. You shouldn't say you need it, but it doesn't hurt. Like those studios out there consider that an important ingredient. So to say that they don't think that they need a looker in order to get their success, yes, that's how the studio mentality and production world thinks. But at the same time, if you have something that sounds so spectacular,
Mm.
uh, you can offset some of that with a spectacular sound. It's not easy. CNC Music Factory. You remember that song, "Everybody Dance Now"? That was another one that had
Mm.
controversy back then because the hot girl that they used in the video
Yeah.
was not the kick-ass voice that everybody knows. "Everybody Dance Now." The girl who sang that beautifully, unfortunately, the studio didn't
Yeah.
feel that she was visually presentable. And when they made the video,
Mm.
that's where you get Millie Vanilli visually.
Yeah. Interesting.
And we don't question that shit. Nobody got on them about that, but it was the same time.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of trickery now, but you said it before, is what do people accept now? And if you've come to see, look at the half times at football games, you know,
Mm.
people just charging
Yeah.
around the stage, and I
Or
don't know.
looking for a gimmick, like let's pull off, Janet Jackson's top.
Yeah.
That was a gimmick.
Get
and
out of
and
an egg.
it's a shame that you have to do that to perform music. Come on. Most of the people who are there to hear something cool. Most of us are music lovers because we like how things sound. All the other senses, it's nice to have them complemented, but I want it to sound good. I would not want to go to a concert just to see something cool and have my ears like, oh, I can't stand this.
I agree. Well,
Because you can go to plenty of concerts that look cool, but you live with the sound that you're getting. It's like,
well, when it
I
comes
just
together,
tortured my ears for 2 hours.
you have the magic when it all comes together, or the Michael Jackson show, or something it's an experience that's up above,
Yeah.
just the
Pink
musical
Floyd.
or the village. Yeah,
That's
right.
the
Good example.
That's the one I wish I got to see, whether it was them in the 80s or the Roger Waters tour later.
Mm.
I really wanted to see one of those Pink Floyd The Wall shows just to see
Yeah.
the gold standard in performance production.
Mm.
Yeah,
Yeah, I didn't.
Floyd's amazing.
Yeah, you saw some of those shows?
Yeah.
I've seen Floyd a few times over the years in the
Oh, you have?
yeah in the late 80s and early 90s.
Wow.
Oh, you lucky son of a bitch.
Way back then, that was in the time
That's
frame
one
that I
of
was
the
seeing
ones.
the Grateful Dead shows.
That's
too.
one of the ones I could.
Yeah.
I saw many. I bet you I saw more Dead shows than you, but I never got to
Probably,
see
yeah.
a Pink Floyd show.
Yeah.
Always wanted to.
Actually, one thing I was going to share real quick was in the sampler. Remember we were talking earlier about the one where we did the chords for the songwriting stuff.
Mm.
Basically, the little sampler, and
Cool.
I just took the.
Oh,
pads.
this is your. Yeah,
Oh, man.
this is the little project he made when they made it.
So like the
Wait a minute,
bottom.
back
Glenn
me up a
tested
little
this
bit, because I've never used this. You've got it in the laptop. You're not on a phone here. You've
Right.
got it. You opened up a track.
No,
and
he's on the web editor.
Yeah,
Yep, they added a new instrument actually, which is the sampler instrument.
a sampler instrument. Okay, thank you.
And so once you add that instrument, then it gives you the pads that are all blank, and then you can just record onto each one. Anything. So like for this is just me playing a C chord. But the
Wow.
idea was to make a little songwriting.
And you
thing. So instead of
could
having
trigger that on your keyboard.
right, using the keys like
You
the
don't have
D.
to click it on the screen. The V key will play that.
So I
Yeah.
just did like those bottom six
So
are going
you
to be the
do
1,
have a
2, 3, 4,
keyboard.
5, and 6 chords. 7, and then the 1, and then on the top I did the basically C minor chords. So if I wanted to borrow from a minor key, but I did from the E flat major being the one. So, and then the whole right side there is all the diminished chords that go with those. So it's just a way of being able to quickly use that as a palette and make a song. Like if I have something I wanted to work on that was a 1-4-5 progression, you can just jump over and
He built his own chord pack.
Oh, wow,
He
that's
sampled.
great.
He sampled his own chord pack.
But the samples to
really
make are
cool.
the samples are really easy to make because all you do is you add the track, which is a sampler. It shows you all the blank ones, and then you can just drag files to it. You can browse the one shots to drag something in from the library there.
Wow.
You can import a file.
They
Or you
really
can just
did
hit
make it
record,
user friendly.
and you can just record your voice doing it too. Like I could record my voice going boom, and like trigger that with a V every time if I wanted to.
But there's one drawback or advantage to the phone is that it's a touch screen where now when it's,
Yeah,
I'm looking at a laptop, so I guess this is a laptop online. You have to touch it with your mouse or something, right? To get those chords to come out.
Yep. Well, those chords actually I played on my guitar, but all I did
Uh,
was go to the record here and then just play
no,
it
no,
from
no.
my
He
guitar.
doesn't have to touch him on his mouse. Those
Oh,
are
I can use,
keyboard
these are the
keys.
keyboard
That
shortcuts also. The
The
4, the
V
5,
on
the
your
6.
keyboard is the
oh,
trigger. So you
I
can hit your
see.
computer keyboard.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
got
yeah, yeah.
16 keys on your computer keyboard that can be triggered.
I
And
get
it's
you now.
latency free there. A computer
Wow.
key goes as fast as a MIDI key.
Yeah.
The
Yeah,
other
yeah,
thing is
yeah.
since you have a MIDI keyboard or a MIDI controller, you could also use the MIDI controller device as the input right
You
there as well.
have velocity. You have all
Oh,
sorts of extras that the computer keyboard doesn't have. Velocity and how hard you hit it on a MIDI keyboard will affect samples, especially if you can sample at multiple layers. If you can say, this is the sample above 56 level and this is the sample below 56 levels, you can play different sounds.
The other thing about the
wow.
samples, when you first make them, they're usually in the gate mode, which means that when you hit them, it'll hold as long as you hold the note,
Yeah.
but it'll stop as soon as you let go.
Yeah, that's cool too.
But if you
Oh,
change
yeah.
it to
That
one
lets you
shot, it'll just
use it
run through.
yeah, it's like it can be a trigger or it can be a loop box. If you want it to be a
Ah,
loop
And if
box,
you say loop,
put it on
it'll
loop.
just play from the beginning to the end, and then it'll keep going
Play it
back.
over and over.
And you can make the loop as long or shorter as you want just by dragging the end. So I could make it shorter just by dragging this, or drag the tail in from this end, make it
now
as short as I want.
this is going to be basic. You load all those sounds in one way or the other, but now you're going to
One
do,
way or the
say,
other. Yeah, exactly.
so you've got your drums and your bass up above and those other tracks. Now you're going to play this thing like an instrument loaded with all these sounds, and it's going to
Yeah.
go onto one track, and you can spontaneously play this thing with your keyboard, that designates the 4, 5, 6, 7, and you're going to play in real time and record it in real time with the other tracks above, right?
Yep, I could do it that way. Like right now, the only track that's not muted is just a MIDI track of me going through the chords. So it's just me playing like, chord 1, chord 2, and going through that way. So that's the recording of me playing. But if I were to hit in the meantime, so I could play it in real time while it's playing that if I wanted to. Is that the question?
But on a separate track, right?
Right now, it wasn't even recording on a separate track, but I could
Oh,
be
okay.
recording on a separate track. I was just playing along. But if I was doing recording, I could have another sampler. I can just copy, like I was saying, I just right click and say duplicate track, and that would duplicate the entire sampler onto another track
Yeah.
with all these samples already populated. And that way I
Okay.
could start recording that one while playing along and having the other one up
And
top already.
and technically,
Yes.
every track you're dealing with this is a sampler, so every track you're dealing with could be a MIDI track. So MIDI track 1 could be going to this sampler and saying play this combination. And MIDI track 2 could be going to the same sampler and playing a totally different combination.
And you can drag the samples right here.
And
Like if you had things that you wanted to
and it
populate
would
them with,
stay
you drag
MIDI.
them right in.
You
Wow.
you don't have to render that. You could record all the MIDI triggers. So like track 1 could be like playing a rhythm where you're using 3 or 4 of those and you're playing them either together or at certain times. And you record all that, which will be a MIDI track. What you record will be a MIDI track saying, hit this sample, because
Right.
each one of those is just a sample in a synthesizer.
Wow.
That's
Yes,
what these top ones were. Were just
information.
quick MIDI tracks that I recorded for those, and then I basically, like
Yeah.
you were saying, it's ran through the
Yeah,
chords to
and look at
hear
the
them
MIDI
on there.
data. The MIDI data is literally like this note, that note, that note.
Can
Like
you
every one of
edit
those
it?
is a basic trigger.
Can you
Oh
edit
yeah,
it
it's MIDI
at that?
data.
Yeah.
Yep.
You can say don't hit the third one, hit the second one.
Mm,
You can replace it because it's MIDI data.
yeah.
And you could say hit and
Wow.
hold this one and do something else, but the hold won't do as much what you would think it would do because it's already holding it from the
Yes.
sampler that was already there. Because the sample, if I just click it once, it plays the whole, triggers the whole sample out because it's a one shot the way I set it up. But there was also, we were looking before at the
And
attack and the release. If you want to change the attack, it'll actually come in like you see that slope that came in. So it'll kind
yeah,
of,
I love how they show you the
Yeah.
visuals here for an online web like
Yeah.
sampler. Those little visuals are really cool. They're useful. You can see the effect
Yes.
of the knob.
Yes. That's a lot of the NI software has that,
Well,
obviously.
yeah.
It's
it's great to visualize a preset
mm,
because a lot of those knobs are intimidating. I'm like, what the fuck does this do?
right.
To see an indicator, a hint of something like that helps me to understand that knob.
Yes. Absolutely.
but normally I would
Well,
probably set up the 16 for the sampler and try to set it up more with, like if it was all drums on this one and all bass parts on that one or all guitar stuff on this one. But this was just, to get a general idea, or if I had an idea for a song in my head and I didn't have my guitar handy and I did have the keyboard in front of me, I could just pop this up and, hit a couple buttons and sample out and see how a song progression comes around.
wow.
To go back to what we were talking about performance earlier, something like this, if you had this opus and it had 5 parts in it, then
Mm,
technically you see those first 4 down there and F. If those represented the 5 parts, and
yes.
we're going to go perform this, and there's 3 of us, so we can
Yeah.
play our instruments that we're going to play, and we're going to go through those 5 parts. The guitarist could literally be stepping on his first pedal and playing the
Yes.
V, and that's going
Yep.
to be about 4 minutes, and plays his
Yeah.
guitar.
Yeah.
Time for that to end and transition to the other one. Stomp. As soon as you stomp, it's going to start part 2. Um,
Yeah.
that's the other part of MIDI triggering and sampling. Because, hey, if you recorded all that stuff and you
Yeah.
put together that backing track, you're in complete control of the whole sound. And everybody who's
Yeah.
watching you knows that you made that sound.
You're right. This is what I was describing with that
if
guy in
I
the
ever
band on the
perform,
next level.
if I ever
Yep.
perform, that's how I have to perform because there's no way in hell I can do everything I want to do
Yeah.
with 2 hands that don't even cooperate with each other half the time.
Wow. You're right. Now, I'm just thinking, how would you use this live? Like we've got it in the laptop here. How would
Yeah,
I
you?
wouldn't use this live. I
exactly.
would
Yeah.
use the same kind of thing. I would use a sampler. In my case, I would use, well, if I was doing it live, I wouldn't want to depend on a computer. So those Akai's, that one that you showed me earlier, Glenn,
Yep.
those
16
Akai's
buttons.
are tough, durable boxes for a couple $100, and you can put in all your parts
Mm,
that you need into it. It doesn't need a whole PC and operating system. You go on that
mm,
stage, that shit will work like a music instrument and doesn't
yeah,
have to be rebooted. I would never want to depend on a computer on stage.
really.
Truth be told, my Roland, I bought it so that if I ever did need to go on stage, I don't need a computer. It is a computer and it's shoved into a
Mm,
solid music case.
I would
right.
use a looper, like a loop station
It's
pedal,
still
like
still
the
a
red
bitch though to bring.
the red loop station pedal. It's got the two stumps on it, like the double wide. That one has just a lot of patches that you can do, and basically you can start putting in a rhythm just by like clapping or snapping or whatever, and then put that
Yeah.
little part to it, and then just add layers to it, and then each layer you're building up a song. You can build bigger layers that are made out of multiple repetitions of the smaller layers.
Wow.
But it's just a way of building it up. You're still building it up on the spot. People are seeing that you're not using a pre-recorded anything. You're
Right.
making it on the spot. It'll be
Yeah,
unique to
yeah.
what
If
you're
you're
doing right
building it
now.
up as and people love that. They
Yeah.
love when you start with like just a simple and next thing you know, 2 measures later it becomes this bigger thing, and then 2 measures later it's bigger and bigger. Um, People who can do that really well can literally sit there for 4 to 5 hours and
Mm,
fucking make a shitload of money sitting in a beach like all day long. I could make a living doing that shit in the right places where, you know, the traffic and the weather,
Are in your favor.
and it's very easy to jam off of.
Wow. Well, yeah, I'm so glad you pulled that up, Glenn. So that's just since this has been released, you've learned this much using it with the phone and here with the online.
He started doing this the morning they put the update out. I saw the update when I got up, and I was like, I noticed it, but I didn't get a chance to really play with it because Andrew was calling and I had to go. Glenn jumped on a couple hours later, and I was gonna mention it to him as an afterthought, and he was like, "Hey, did you know?"
He's already there.
And he started showing. Well, yeah, he actually made a sample file. I was like, perfect. Like, this is what I would have done eventually. He was doing it the moment they fucking pushed it out.
That's great.
Yeah, it was something that
I-
I'd been waiting for. Actually, it was something that I thought was
Well, you knew.
would be a really good
Yeah,
addition to
same
BandLab.
here.
Oh, I'm going to touch on the last subject.
It was.
before I have to go to
This is
bed.
the best addition they've added.
Somebody told me, and this lastly, and I must go to bed, is that there's a rumor that they're going to have more mastering options. Have you heard about that?
Yep, there already are a couple.
What do you mean
that
for
are
their
different.
mastering choices? I don't
Yeah.
like the choices they have, so they better get better options because they all suck. I will master my own
Yeah,
future.
I'm a
as
fan
far
also
as
of doing
sound
like
goes.
my own mastering. But the one thing was that when you do go, like if I did say I wanted to publish this right now, you do have the mastering options right there.
Right.
And you can go in and you can preview, and you can also select a certain section of the song, for example, and put it on loop and just select from the different 4 options, and you'll hear it going through what it would sound like if it was
Yeah,
mastered this way,
you
or
can
that
hear
way,
'em.
or that way, or that way.
Although
So
what
can
you
preview
hear
them
is
without committing to
deceptive.
it. Right, but to give you a
What
general
you
idea.
hear is deceptive because it may sound good when you're listening to the comparison there. The only reason why their mastering will work for you is assuming you're not getting the mastering you want. If you're getting the mastering you want, their choices will not sound good to you because the first thing you'll think is, I lost something.
Yeah.
Their mastering will fuck up your, if you're happy with your mastering. In the early days, I wasn't happy with my mastering and I was using their advanced because it boosted, it added that
Yeah.
louder compression, which I was like, my masters suck, and this was pushing it to a better place. As I got better control of my mix and I really was like watching like a hawk to not clip and do everything, eventually when I would do it and what I would hear didn't sound better than what I had mastered. And
Yeah.
once I hit that point, I stopped ever using their mastering at all because I don't want them to decide what my, and it's hard enough to get your final sound to sound the way you want on BandLab. When you turn all that shit off, it still changes. So what you send from what you hear in your ears at your computer is not what ends up getting on BandLab. There's a slight adjustment. So you have to compensate for that in some way yourself. And I used to use compression for that, DBX. I used to compensate for the BandLab shift with Dolby noise reduction. You know, the shit that we used back in the 90s, great. It's what we're used to, CD quality noise reduction. And that I used for 6-7 months until I had I had started to EQ and level my mixes for what I wanted on BandLab. And eventually the compression and the BandLab mastering no longer were fixing anything for me. And that's when you know you're at that's where you know when you're where you want to be with the sound you're trying to get and where you're trying to put it. Because the difference on BandLab from what you have is something you got to compensate for.
You know how
It's a punch, it's a push kind of difference.
and I have some of your experience, but I don't have your mixing or engineering skills. So what I do as my workaround, Tony, being a garage band guy, right, is I get done with an Opus mix, or kind of done with 30 tracks, right? And that's already hell. Well, what I do is as I'm going through that mix, I keep running it through their mastering. I do preliminaries, then I go
Oh,
back and I say, oh, those hi-hats, they're pulling out that frequency too high. And I pull it down in
now,
my
what do you
mix.
adjust? What do you adjust? Do you adjust on the level, or do you acute? If it's the hi hats, and the hi hats are part of a drum track, so you got
Yeah.
different instruments in that drum
If I
kit.
can't
Do
isolate the
you
instrument, I
bring
have a
down the
problem.
level,
The EQ.
EQ it on the
Yeah.
hi hats? If
Yeah.
I have a hi hat or a splash cymbal problem,
Yeah.
that's an EQ solution.
That's what I do for them.
At that point,
Other guys are
otherwise
a volume.
solve it earlier.
Yes. And you see,
If
every
I
iteration
have
that
a
I put
really
up.
crazy drum instrument,
Mm,
you can either solve it at the EQ level post,
mm,
or for like splashy cymbals and hi hats and shit. For me, MIDI, I can either fix it at the beginning or the end there. And
right.
usually at the beginning, they don't sound so splashy, but if you have two or three kits going and
Mm,
extra effects that weren't there when you were originally bouncing it, um, EQing out problematic stuff like that is
yeah.
how you fix the extra sizzle from a cymbal.
And that's what I was doing. So I do all these test mixes. There might be like 5 to 10 of them for each one of these songs. And so I put it up on BandLab. I use the auto master, and then I drive to work in my car and I listen to it on different stereos. And
The
let's
work test.
right. And then and actually take notes. I talk into my voice mic as I'm driving. Lot lower hi-hat,
Ooh,
sub
now
bass is,
that's a
yeah.
good advice. If I did have drive time like I used
Mm.
to, and I was listening to my mix as I was
I,
driving to work, I would want to record my notes as I'm listening to it because you don't remember that shit later.
my phone is loaded. I'm stuck in the car commuting back and forth an hour and a half each day. So I
Oh
load
no.
up in the morning
Use that time.
all my preliminary or all the songs that I have these work in progress projects on BandLab. That's the beauty of it. It's on the cloud. So when I'm driving around, I can access all the songs that I'm working on. And not only do I do like mixing like that, but mostly what I do is I write parts. I actually will hit the recorder and say, this is a high counter melody, and I sing the part into it. And then I take notes on the note, it's an iPhone, on the notes
You are
section.
really maximizing your time.
I have to. It's an
Song
hour and a half a
composition,
day.
hey, what the hell? Yeah, if you're in traffic or anything like that,
Yeah.
song
So when
composition is something you can kind of do
I get
without
home,
like much attention to the road.
yeah, well, I luckily, yeah, you try. The
Yeah.
corridor I drive on is pretty crazy, so it adds excitement to the composition. But I get back home and then I listen to those recordings, and some of them I can't use for some reason. I wasn't thinking right, but whatever. I get a lot of extra melodies and ideas in the car when I'm pulled out of the element of the studio. And then the trick is to capture those melodies, because the phrasing is so important on a melody that if you just try to remember it, even 5 minutes later, da, 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 da,
Yeah.
da, da, you're like,
Unless
yeah,
you're capturing that melody, you won't remember it.
that you
It's
won't even,
sometimes it's
yeah,
like coming up with a lyrical hook. I guarantee you,
yeah,
any singer out there, don't ever convince yourself that you'll remember it tomorrow when you come
mm-mm,
up with the best hook you ever did. Because
no,
I've come up with a zillion of them, and I should have wrote them down,
it's
and I
nothing the
didn't.
next day,
I
nothing.
have written a lot down though. Like my text file is probably like your sound clips.
Yeah,
There, I do have a shitload of things that like come out in spurts.
yeah,
You get a line sometimes for a song just randomly,
mhm.
and you don't necessarily know which song it's for, but creativity can sometimes come out in
Oh,
like a fireworks
it's
session.
yeah, it's a fire hose. It's like being up that spigot. And sometimes you're in the shower, right? Or I'm driving. Sometimes I almost need a part of my body needs to be preoccupied, like I'm jogging or driving. And now the creative part of my mind is
Something sets a
busy.
rhythm.
That's
Something
right.
sets a rhythm.
The other part of the body
Yes.
is in autopilot. And now the creative mind is saying, da, 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 and now you've got to grab that
I
phrasing
used to do
or it's
that.
fresh. Yeah.
Wh- I did construction. My dad was a carpenter.
Mm,
Until I was like old enough to get jobs from other people, the
mm,
only job I could get was construction. And when I used to do roofing and I had to nail in the
yeah.
plywood, it's the closest I ever got to being a good drummer because I would get into the doom 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 doom, and I actually would write songs all day long. Like I hated having to work for like 10 hours.
Yeah.
So musically, I was just using every opportunity to
Yeah.
turn it into like banging and in rhythm.
Well, I sat through 12 years of school and all I did was play drums at my desk. You just, my kick drum and the snare. That's all I zoned out the teacher. It's shameful to say this now, but I don't even
Oh,
grasp certain things that they were saying. But all I was doing was working on time and beats. I know it sounds
yeah,
insane. That's true.
I, I had busy fingers. I was
Mm.
definitely doing the same thing with
Tapper.
with usually my right hand. I have a imbalance, my left hand versus my right hand. Uh, Back then, like on my desk, I was doing this all day. I was playing shit.
Uh-huh.
I had a virtual keyboard in front of me all the time on my desk.
Yes.
eh,
Oh
If I
yeah.
wasn't sleeping or I skipped.
Yeah.
I skipped more than I went, and sometimes when I was there, I did fall asleep.
Oh yeah, well, I used to space out. It was and then suddenly hear my name, from the
Mm.
teacher, sort of like, and what does that paragraph mean? And I'm suddenly realizing, oh my God, I haven't like been here like for half an hour. I have no idea what they're talking about. It was
I was
truly terrible.
eh, I was usually ready if they ever asked me a question. I did actually know. I wasn't ignoring it because I didn't want to know. I just already knew.
Yeah, I had my
My
way.
teachers didn't
Yeah.
talk to me to see if I knew what they were saying. They talked to me to try to see if I was awake.
Oh, those were the days. I guess it had to happen for a reason. But my whole life is like this. It just kind of builds up to this point that I'm at now. I've gone down some cul-de-sacs and I've gotten out of music. I've quit a few times, completely cold turkey, and put the instruments away. Before COVID, I didn't even have a working bass in my house. I used the government checks to to buy a bass, and
Oh,
that's
now that's a good investment.
yeah, finally the politicians did
Oh
something for
yeah,
me and for the greater art community.
that's
Doing that.
making lemonade, man.
That's that's making whiskey sours when you're stuck with lemonade.
Yeah. That's that
So
Jack
anyway,
Daniels lemonade.
yeah, but I look at it. When you write, you're pulling in from all your experience of your relationships, everything that's happened in your life, and that comes out in your writing. And there were times where I just really had to get away from music and just do other things, like be a father or whatever it was.
Yeah.
I coached
Well,
soccer for 9 years.
and and you know why that's most important to do is because if you didn't do that, you wouldn't have anything to write about in music. Music
Right.
is a reflection of the life that you live your expression that you do of it. Music is one way of expressing it. Sometimes you do have to go do non-musical things,
Yeah.
or not just non-musical. Sometimes you got to go do the surviving and living things in order for the creative outlets to have any
Yeah.
uh,
Substance.
uh, for that hose to have anything
Yeah.
to go through it and go out. The
And also
creative
to
hose does not turn on until you live some life.
Yeah.
Hurt,
I
love,
I agree.
hate,
It's
all
like
of
growing
that makes music.
as a teenager, all I did was like play and play, right? And shredding. But I'm not a technical player, but I just played and played. But I always knew there was a part of me that was like just not filled or matured yet. And it took until I was in my mid 20s before, and you'd have some
That's when it
breakups.
kicked in for me.
Yeah, lots of
I had
problems.
breakups before. The cool thing with breakups is if you're writing when you're young, 12, 13 years old, I could have wrote some of the best breakup songs ever. That's when you feel them. That's when you live them. That's when they matter. Oh my God, the world is over.
Oh
You
yeah, the
turn that
drama.
into you turn that into a song when you're feeling it like that.
Yeah. Yeah, you're capturing something, a moment in time. Well, I tell you
And
what,
you're not gonna feel it like that later. So if you think you're gonna write the same
right.
breakup song at 40 that you would at 14, for all you 14-year-olds out there, write it now.
That's another beautiful thing about the lab. In summary, come full circle is
Yeah,
that look how many young people now, really young, with that sampler and some of the tools in their hands, right? That we could have only
they're
dreamed about.
showing their creativity. I
Yeah,
can't imagine what you're going to see with this sampler that you see here. Some of them who
yeah,
haven't ever had a sampler in front of them
yeah.
now do. I can't wait to see what the hell
Ah,
starts popping up on here. I expect a lot of really cool stuff
and
and
I
a lot of
agree.
really crazy stuff.
And I think it's going to come from some very interesting places. It might be singers that are in India or some other place, and they're just going to modify it to their needs and create something
And it
totally
might be
new.
somebody who never made a song before in their lives.
Right?
Like somebody who literally
Exactly.
went onto a social platform and said, "Oh, I can do something with sound
Push
with
some
this. Well,
buttons.
let's try this." And oh, this
Yeah.
sounds cool. What do you guys think? It, tomorrow's like Mozart is not defined by
No.
any long shot. We
And
don't know what tomorrow's musical savant is going to look like.
somebody like Tony with the tracks or songs that have 100 tracks in them, like you could, take your phone out and go around the city and get, a bird singing here and a truck screeching over there or
Yeah.
whatever, like add all of
Yeah.
those kinds of sounds into your songs too, using the sampler as well.
I know it.
And to
Yeah.
take on top of that, like today's genius is not just going to ignore the fact that those things are visual as much as they are audio. They're not just going to be making that killer song with a sampler. They're going to make creative visuals. Like what I'm seeing for
Mm,
videos now,
yes.
as those who want to like dance on the screen with certain uh, visual messages, you're seeing uh, uh, an artistic thing going on there where today's
Mm,
video editors are
yeah.
finding ways to visually make poetry like we do with words and music.
I agree. There's some fabulous talent out there that's coming together, and there's a guy over in, I think he's in Ireland, is called You Are Easy, like Urezy. Have you seen him? His work, his
I
video
don't think
work.
so.
He's done 3 videos of our opuses, and
Oh,
they're beautiful. Uh,
Yeah. Very.
yeah, he's a great artist. He's done some stuff for Abel and others. Yeah, he's trying to make a go of it and do add a little commercialization to it.
well,
I gather
why
he's a
don't
young
you
guy. Mm,
ask him if he wants to come on one night and
yeah,
show us those videos? I'd love to ask him what he's using and his approach there because, video editing and all of that stuff is another
yeah,
thing that we're all going to be having to do a lot more of for ourselves, for our uh,
that's a great
businesses.
idea. Glenn, you know him who I'm talking about, don't you?
Yep. I've seen his name on there.
Yeah.
I don't think we've interacted too much, but I've seen of him, and we were just talking, Tony and I, about DaVinci and other
Yeah.
video editing software. But I just downloaded that one a couple of days ago, so I'm gonna start
Oh,
taking a look at that myself.
wow. Uh, well, with this
You
guy,
know,
he's over in Ireland. He's got a 6 hour time difference, but maybe we could get him on some show.
Technically, I got a 12-hour difference. I get up at fucking 5 at night. I don't know
What?
what country I live in.
I get up 5 in the morning. You get up 5 at night.
No, I get up at supper time, at least for the last couple of months. Usually my schedule shifts on like a regular, like monthly basis. And for a couple of days, I go back to normal human time, but I haven't in about 3 months because Ange is like a machine. So, Monday through Friday is kind of a like wake up, go do stuff until the end and go to sleep and lather, rinse, repeat. And the weekends becomes my like catch up reboot.
Wow.
It's just hard when you like the 5-day schedule. It doesn't have to be this. Any 5-day schedule gets hard to recalibrate yourself every week.
Oh, yeah. Well, you're doing a hell of a lot of work up there, and probably even a lot of things I don't even know about. But no, keep at it, man. That's what keeps us young and vibrant. You got to keep pushing yourself.
Definitely.
And with that, gentlemen, I must get going. 1:30. I got cheap studio time booked at 5. So, it's gonna
Oh,
take a
killer.
nap.
Yeah, it's like order your pizzas now. Save
Like
$4.
like in 4 hours. No, but tomorrow I'm gonna let myself sleep in today here. I got to drive out of here at 7:30 to get to work. So, I'm gonna play
You
some
gotta
music on the weekend.
gotta get one of those self-driving Teslas that go through
I wouldn't trust,
traffic. Oh, I
like you
wouldn't
wouldn't
either,
have a
ever.
laptop on stage. I wouldn't,
Ever.
no, not around here, I'll tell you that. I have a car that has a variable cruise control, which is an absolutely brilliant innovation, that it tracks the car in front of you, and you set it to 1 or 2 car lengths or whatever you want. And I get behind people, I set that thing up, and it just tracks behind them. They slow down, I slow down, all the way to a stop.
Nice.
And that is cool. I have to admit that, like, I would test that. I would try that, but
You keep your
I
feet
would, I
ready
would
and you
be,
keep your hands on the
yeah,
wheel.
I would
But
still be nervous.
My whole
just
thing
like
is that
your,
I'm just never going to be behind anybody. It's my whole problem.
well, I drive like hell. Tony knows the route I take, and I keep up with the Audis. We take no prisoners when we need to get to work.
Yep.
That fast lane is for players.
Yeah, I live less than 10
Yes,
miles
you
from.
better be ready to play.
I'm less than 10 miles from New York City. So yeah, there's definitely
Oh, that's
definitely fun
right.
driving.
You're on the
Yeah,
Jersey side.
he's
Yeah.
on New York's toilet side.
Be nice to Jersey.
Are
I
you?
came to this country. Yeah, I've started
I don't
Jersey.
I don't mean that as a slander to the Jersey. I mean that as a slander to New York, because that is literally New York's toilet. Like, that's where all the shit going in and out comes from.
I've lived down there too. Yeah, so I
All
lived
the
in Jersey and New
traffic.
York. Yeah,
The, the
it's all
the only other place where
crazy.
there's as much traffic is if you're coming from Connecticut. The
Oh yeah,
Connecticut traffic to New York
I-95.
City is bad every morning, but
Mm.
it's mostly just in the top corner of Connecticut. But Jersey feels New York. Like, New York literally shits down on Jersey every day.
Nah.
And Jersey comes back every fucking morning. It says, "We own you."
It's like people want to get together for dinner sometimes. They're like, hey, let's meet for dinner at 6 o'clock. I'm like, no, it's like I'm not driving anywhere at between
They
5 and
might
6
as
Yeah.
o'clock.
they
Not
might as
doing it.
well make it they might as well make it one state, but you would never get either state to agree on the name. So, fuck you, York. We're
We'll
Jersey.
just call it
They, the,
new. Let's call it new.
that's why you have two states there. It's like North Carolina, South Carolina. There's a reason why you got two.
Oh yeah. Oh, it actually is different. I've lived in both, and I
Yeah,
and I like Connecticut. There's a lot of trees here, and
I
our
loved
highways move
Connecticut.
along. I can't
What kind of
complain about.
Ian? What kind of trees do you have in Connecticut?
Hey,
about
It's
the-
alive.
Hey.
Bitch, what you mean, Connecticut?
How many different varieties of trees do you have in Connecticut?
You should
Let's
know,
have
my
a
friend.
we have
You
Oh,
we
went to
there's
high
a
school with
lot,
me.
man.
Yeah, we
Hell
got a
yeah,
ton
those
of
big
trees.
walnuts that fall down.
Oh, we got it all, man. Well, Mike, you remember in high school, we went to Ledyard High School together in the shoreline
Oh,
of
you guys went to
Connecticut.
Ledger?
Yeah, high school.
It's all casino now. As
True.
far as the land can see.
It was
Like
eaten up from two
cards.
sides. One is Mystic, the
Yeah.
tourist district on below it, and then the casino reservation on the north side. Yeah,
Mhm.
it was all right.
But
It's
it's
mostly,
beautiful. I have to say they did not fuck things up. Like it is a beautiful part of Connecticut. It's
oh
the
yeah.
it's the little New York.
Well, they've come flying up out of
It really is.
New York on the weekend with a
It's
Beamer.
like
Yeah,
it's like going to New York or Atlantic City or LA or Vegas. But I could drive there in 45 minutes from where I lived. Loved
yeah,
it.
yeah. It's
Spent
all good.
a good chunk of my years at Ledyard.
Did you really?
Are you kidding? During my poker years, like
Oh, you
hitting
mean at the
hitting Ledyard
reservation?
was hell
Foxwoods.
yeah. Like that's where all yeah, Foxwoods, the tournaments that were going on there between like 2006 to like 2009, I could be playing like 150 people for $10,000 pots, and most of these players had no game.
Wow. That's amazing. I didn't know. We've got a lot to talk about in the future too. I was
Oh,
about 3 miles
you a
south of
poker
you.
player?
No, I was going to say I was coaching soccer about 3 miles south of you in North Stonington, where my kids went to school. But the casino looms over us like a giant there. But at the same time, you were 3 miles away from me, taking on some of the best poker players. That's amazing.
Oh yeah, not far at all. I
Oh
actually hooked
no.
up with some chicks from Stonington. Stonington was a great place.
Yeah. Oh yeah. The Borough and Mystic and
Maybe
um,
maybe the ex-wife, huh?
hey, go back to sleep.
Hey,
Jeez, hey.
hey,
This
Maybe
was
hey.
back in the 80s and early 90s. So
okay, Glenn,
I'm
turn the
sorry.
recording off.
I meant the first ex-wife. Sorry.
The ex-wife. Yeah, we won't go there. That'll be for another kind of show, another kind of podcast. Uh, but yeah, you may know some of the people we know. Let's put it that way, Tony.
I may have played them at that casino. It was a lot of locals.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Well, no, that's very cool. Very cool that we would be in the same part of the world. You were probably about literally 3 miles away from where I was for all those years. That's really
Well,
very
across
cool.
the years, I went from Hartford. I was born in Hartford
Hmm,
to East Hartford to Tolland, and
hmm.
Tolland was where I was at till last year,
Yes,
which was pretty much like close to Mass, but
yes,
still in the. I could get to Ledyard in. I could get there in a half hour actually if I went at the right time,
right.
because when there's no traffic, those back roads zip
Oh yeah,
right through them. They're like
absolutely.
highways.
Yeah, we drive in this state, I'll tell you that. I do. Yeah, I, it's a beautiful thing about the state. Well, my friends, I must go now or I will be unable to work
Pumpkin.
tomorrow. Yeah, exactly.
Pumpkin mode.
All good. Appreciate you guys coming out.
Yeah.
Don't
Um,
forget your slippers.
well,
It was awesome to get to talk to you.
oh, yeah,
We
well,
we got
thank
to
you.
play with that contact system.
Yeah, we'll work on some of that. Let's see if we can get our video friend, maybe for some a different perspective.
Yep.
Um,
Yes.
keep going with the technology let's see if BandLab keeps changing things on us too. Some more mastering options. They're talking.
BandLab is going to keep changing.
Mm.
And for the most part, it's all for the good. So I'm
Yeah,
very
good with it.
positive there.
Me too. I love it. And I've been trying to drag all my musician friends over to the platform. And some of the old timers are
Yeah,
real kicking and
same
screaming.
here.
They don't get it, man.
I know. Every one of my friends from the old days is an old timer because I'm an old timer.
Yeah.
I've only gotten 2 of them on. One has actually run with it. He's getting in his stride. The other one has an account but has never tried to use the software or put a track up to
I know
go
it.
from there.
It's stunning to me that you wouldn't embrace it. I don't get it. But everybody's different, right? I'm going to go see. Hey, Mike, are you
Lack of
there?
time. The reason why the second one hasn't, lack of time. He's got a great job,
Yeah.
keeps him busy.
Well,
That keeps you away from music.
it does. I do
Great
both.
jobs that are not music will keep you away from music.
Yeah, I know what you're saying. But, you know, it's so simple to get involved in this thing. And I think the world has changed so quickly, especially after COVID. But I'm going to see. Mike, are you there?
Unfortunately, yes, I'm still here.
Thank God. I'm going to go see Rich Thorpe play this weekend on Saturday. So if you want to come up to North Windham, Connecticut, you can join me and watch one of the best guitar players we ever played with.
Wait, who's that?
Where's he
Thorpe.
playing in Wyndham? Where's he playing in
Nice.
Wyndham?
At the North Wyndham at the Dairy Bar. Come on.
I want you to record it on your iPhone and send it to me.
Yeah, okay, sure. I'll call you first thing tomorrow.
And anytime people are playing out, you guys should consider the value of recording shit, because if the band that's playing is cool with you recording it and distributing it on whatever social platforms you are, that's a good thing for everybody. That is how you share the love, as Ange would say. Wish she was awake right now to hear it.
Nice how you tied us full circle there for our exit.
It's
Bring her back
recorded
in.
though. She could check it later.
All right, we love
That
you,
is
Ange.
how you share. That's how you share the love.
And let me, thank you guys just on the way out here. And Ange, thank you very much. When you hear this, it was a pleasure to be on.
Angie.
All right.
Angie. Yeah. All right. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys.
Serenaded her out. Yeah, it was
All right, guys.
awesome.
All right. Take care, guys.
Good night.
Take care.
Bye.
Well, yeah.